From the last conversation you and I had, and I've had a lot of great ones with various other people, but I think yours is one of the very few ones that I can actually recall that has one of the major impacts on me personally and professionally. No, I mean that. So, and I'm explaining why I say that here, because as this recording, I had a guest on my show, a comedian by the name of Christy Miller, and what was interesting for me was that when I'd heard her stand up, not to say that I was leaning towards like a certain set of values, but it's just perspective on certain things along the way that kind of like, I'm not going to say clouded, but it's kind of hard for me to explain, but I looked at certain things a certain way that I started to notice that I was starting to unravel a little bit. And then when I heard her comedy, in a weird way, I didn't realize that her comedy, or at least her take on it, put a lot of perspective about how I looked at certain things for myself that she more or less had to kind of like shed a light on. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to. I think I just overthought certain things along the way. So I'm pointing her out because when I spoke with her, a lot of the things we've talked about, a lot of things I've heard about her comedy had a really effect on me too. And then after the conversation, I started thinking about the various things that occurred in my life at that point. And then I thought because I was doing something for the show as well, because I was just finishing with the episode and I was putting all things together. And I started reflecting on the various people that I've had conversations with on my show. And it dawned on me that when I had my conversation with you, it was interesting for me because when I started talking to you, I told you before that, when I first reached out to you, it was kind of like a formal approach, like, hey, would you like to be on my show? And we said what we said in the interactions there. And then from there, it just kind of got deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah. And then when the conversation ended up going a lot longer, and I appreciate that conversation so much because it gave me a lot to think about, because not to say that I had any preconceived notion about you. It wasn't that. It was more in a sense like I learned a lot about you, but the things I learned about you had helped me in a lot of ways too, that gave me a perspective on how I look at myself as someone who is doing this, more or less this role, if you will. Yeah. So when I started to share with you in private about some other endeavors I'm trying to pursue here, you were actually the first person that I thought of here, because I loved your work ethic. And when you had shared your story about what it was you were going through the highs and lows and relationships that were more or less kind of fractured along the way and how you've learned to deal with that, there's quite a few things that I've gathered here from you. And one of which is that, one, I thought you were very mature in the way that you conducted yourself. Secondly, the way that you had figured out what was more or less the best thing for you to figure out what's best for you. And then what we discussed in private, what you've shared before in the past, it was clearly obvious that you pay attention to what you're doing. And I'm not saying that, you listen to what I say. It's not what I'm implying, but, whatever I had said to you at that point, you actually reflected on those things and figured out what works best for you to follow through with your endeavors there. So when I had those conversations with you after the fact, and we kind of got more in depth, there was I realized that there was a lot of things about myself that I tend to believe that I thought, I got a handle on things because I figured out what works for me. But then when I had seen you go about your things and I actually seeing how you progress from there, it's quite, I guess the best way I could describe it is, I'm gonna say it like this: it's quite inspirational. That's the best way I could describe it, because it was something that I really, really took very, very seriously. And when you had shared with me about, the various things you and I had talked in private, and then how you're going about it moving forward, because when we had last conversed here on the show, you were talking about some new ideas you had to go on with your show, and then what you were doing, what you're planning on doing, and then you actually went through it. And I'm seeing the variations of how you started and then what progressed from there. And a lot of which I'm a big fan of. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been keeping up with a lot of your stuff lately. We've already talked before, but I can clearly see that the consistency is still there. And the other thing I've also noticed as well too, that even though I think it's been a while since we actually spoke, but when we were conversing, it was one of those things where I figured that in time that there would be a period that we probably wouldn't be conversing, not because we obviously didn't get along. It's not that, but whatever you're doing, you are going to invest all your energy on that. And the way I see it is that whenever I come back to revisit, you in that sense, that there's going to be some new things that you're going to be have experienced along the way that will more or less change your approach on certain things. And I figure, and you were going to probably delve into some things that I think would be quite interesting for me to want to pick apart to see what you've done differently this time around. So, because you were my 50th guest, that actually made quite an impact on me. Not, and it's kind of by chance you happen to be my 50th, but now that you're, in this case, I'm aiming for this to be the 100th episode with you back on it. I thought it would be more or less like a fitting way, since you were at that halfway point in the episodes, and now here we're at the more or less the century mode of these episodes, if you will. It would be a proper way to more or less kind of just start off with that. But this is me basically giving you your props, but also saying thank you as well too. And I really do mean that.
Thank you.
For what you have more or less bestowed onto me here, and quite a few people have done that for me as well. But I wanted to give you your props on that because there was quite a few things that I've learned to reevaluate for myself as well too, which I started kind of condensing some stuff and focusing on other areas that I needed to work on first, and then be able to handle this more properly. Whereas before I was just kind of like rushing through things and didn't realize that I needed the time to slow down. And after some period of time, after conversing with you and learning some things on the way, you were kind of more or less the catalyst that kind of started that here for me as time has gone by. And then upon our revisited conversations, it definitely had left with more an impression on me for me to help myself through figuring out what's the best option for me based upon what I've been able to learn from you from our conversations here. So again, this is me giving your props on that as well. So thank you for that.
You. No, thank you for having me back.
Well, I figured that, since we haven't actually spoken in quite some time, so I was wondering what's new with you, because I know the last time you and I had, well, you know what's funny? I'm going to point this out here for you, because the last time I actually interacted with you on your Twitch stream, I don't remember if you said this here, but I'm going to try my absolute best to remember how you said it. So I'm going to paraphrase here. But I remember, I think it was where you were doing a cooking show prior. No, you were actually watching a stream of a film. That's what it was. You're watching a double feature. And then when you had, when you were finishing the first film, I said, well, I'm going to close out tonight because I'm getting up early tomorrow morning to go for a hike. And then you said something to the effect of, go on the hike so I can live vicariously to you. And then the way you said that cracked me up. And I think you almost like were embarrassed that you said, because I literally I cut off as soon as you said that, and I started cracking up. And I was like, if there's one way to close out, my evening with a good laugh, I'm glad it was you, because after that, it was, it was one of those things like I got to come back. But then unfortunately that didn't happen for me at that point. But the very little I have been keeping up with you through your social media posts and some of the notifications for your Twitch stream. Obviously things have pretty much kept going here for you, but there was a period of time where you just stopped, where you weren't doing things for quite a bit of time. And I remember at one point I thought, does that mean she just quit altogether? Didn't think that was the case, but it did cross my mind here. So I'm wondering, between that interim, what exactly you were doing at that point before you kind of got back into the mix of things here, because I was curious about what actually had happened that got you taking a step back from everything at that point.
About this time last year, I was commissioned by a local brewery to put together a comedy and music festival. Like start to finish, here's the strategic plan for it. Did that. We went back and forth for a couple months. I had stipulations that if I was going to do it for them, that they had stipulations and ramifications for the way that I was going to run it. Ultimately, it didn't fall through with them, it fell through with them. And I was like, okay, well, I put in all this work. This could be beneficial for cult comedy cinema, because I could build out, it's a 3-day, 4-stage festival. All the back end logistical work is done. I've got all the production crews, security lined up. I mean, all we have to do is book bands and get sponsorships. So I took it to another brewery here in town that I do all my live shows at. I pitched it to them and they were like, sold, let's go. So I took on a very large project that was supposed to happen in June of this year. Like I said, 3 days, 4 stages, over 170 acts total, musicians and comedians.
Oh, okay.
So, and not we got podcast recordings. There's going to be a cult comedy episode with a, guest. And we got into the home stretch, which was essentially October of last year through a few weeks ago. We finally made the decision to push out a year. And during essentially January through March, I was going like 3 days a week without sleep because it was just constant, like following up with investors, getting sponsorships pulled in, getting our booking done, following up with security. There's so many different components to running a festival, and normally there's like a full team of people doing it.
This is all you doing it by yourself?
It was me doing it with a group of like 3 other people.
Oh.
And I thankfully had the experience in the sense of I've done some events, but I was able to lean on people that have been in the festival industry for decades, because that's where my dad worked back in the day. And so I was going back and forth with stream, where I was doing sporadic, trying to get like a couple streams in a week. I was honestly just so torn up about it. And I was talking with one of my moderators, and like our Discord server and like a private channel that we have. And I was like, I'm just so tired that when I'm on stream, I'm not giving you guys my best. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm exhausted. I can't even think to pick out movies or be funny or anything, because like I haven't slept in 2 days. And he was just like, we would much rather see you rested and happy and wanting to be here versus just doing it out of obligation or stretching yourself. And I spoke with my other moderator, and he kind of mirrored the same sentiment. So I pulled back, and I was trying to give like one every 2 weeks during that period, which I think the longest stretch I went was, I think 3.5, 4 weeks of no streams.
It was about a month, I recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like towards the end of the summer, if I remember correctly.
I think that was actually just like a few weeks ago. I think
for that length of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought this was. Oh, okay. I was in the impression it was all. I recall from being last year, or maybe I was thinking at the beginning of the year, because there was a period of time at the beginning of the year you were not doing much of anything.
Yeah. So it's beginning of the year.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. I fucked up the schedule. Yeah, I know what you're saying now.
Yeah. I mean, I did get stuck in England because I forgot my passport.
I remember that story.
That's on me. Yeah. I mean, I thought I could come back without a visa, but they were like, no. And I was like, I don't need it. Oh, it's fine. Yeah. But so just kind of like making the decision to allocate my energy into what was at hand. I mean, the festival itself, like not being like, oh, look at how big it is, but I mean, like our budget there when we decided to pivot was $800,000 that I was in charge of, on top of I have to pay these, I think it was in that like 160, 175, I have to pay these acts. I have to pay the all of the crew that show up, all the security, like all of these paychecks are riding on me. And I was like, Natalia 8 months ago, I was like, this will be fine. And so I made the decision. I have like a board of directors and people that I've been leaning on for support. And we sat down and we talked about it. And it's like, we can pull it off this June. But if we pull it off this June, we're going to have to cut back on the quality that we're producing. And I was like, I'm not willing to cut back on quality. I would much rather suck up my pride, because my pride can't pay this bill, and push it out a year. And so that's what we've done. But in pushing it out a year, most of like the hard work is done. So I'm back to my normal streaming schedule as of now. And I'm able to kind of redirect most of my energy into marketing the festival versus trying to get all the work that I've already gotten done.
So a year as in like 2024, is that what you're referring to?
Yes. So,
I mean, why does it have to be so far out for you to be able to more or less kind of push out for that length of time there? Because is it because it's just the season that you guys are aiming for? That's more, okay.
So we're trying to line it up within different events here in Birmingham. So we're, it's not the weekend after Pride. There's like a week buffer in between Birmingham Pride and the festival. Mm-hmm. It's also not falling on Father's Day weekend. And it's also, there's a week buffer between 4th of July. So it's like a sweet spot in Birmingham.
I see what you're saying.
There's no other festivals going on in our area. It's the weekend following Bonnaroo. So if people are already in Tennessee for Bonnaroo, and they can, make a week-long trip out of it, stay here for this festival. It makes booking easier for me. Lots of different factors, components that go into it.
So when you're getting all that stuff worked out, with the amount of time you have between now and then, is everything kind of set in stone about what the next step's going to be? Or is it kind of like a tentative thing where sorry if everyone that was supposed to be booked for this summer, we're postponing to next year. And is there any guarantee that most of them will be coming back, or is it kind of like, whoever's available will just take up and then we'll fill in the gaps later on?
So it's a mix of both. With this year, we were just negotiating our headliners. We hadn't signed contracts with anyone. We hadn't paid deposits, and we weren't able to get our dream headliners to begin with. So we're redirecting this year with having a year out, able to reach out to those like dream headliners, dream bands, be like, hey, and start those negotiations early versus we started a little late.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then the big thing with the festivals, we're showcasing our local comedy and music scene. So I want to say like 95. I think we've had like one or two that haven't like confirmed solid yeses from the local scene. There's like, I think one person that like may be moving, so they're not sure if their band's going to perform, but like everyone else is like, yeah, no, we're here. But we are, all the logistical stuff is lined up. So like my production crew, my security, my like logistical renting, like the fencing companies and that sort of stuff, they're all lined up and on hold. I just pushed the date out. They kept my deposits. And then with bands, it's just whoever's available this time next year. But we did miss out on several bigger local bands this year because they were already booked. So we will get them next year.
Do you have a new shot of life now that you have the time to be able to go back and get back in the swing of things, for not just with Cult Comedy, but I'm talking about, the marketing aspect for this festival you're working on here, because you kind of ran pretty stretched yourself out to a point where you were almost it's essentially you were pretty much just unavailable to the point because you were just not you wore yourself out. And once you kind of get yourself back recollected, because I know last time you and I spoke, you talked about the amount of sleep you get was what, 6 hours if you're on a good night.
Yeah, on a good night.
I'm still assuming that's more or less the same thing that you're still going through here. So I'm not sure how that recovery process for you to be able to come back to all this with the little amount of sleep you get, because I would assume that with being wiped out for so many days in a week, that you probably would dedicate an entire day, if not a good amount of days, to just sleep through the whole noise, if you will, and then recollect yourself. But I don't think that was the case for you at all. Is that kind of fair to say?
I took about a week and a half off of everything but my regular job. And it was just like sleeping, like actual normal people hours. And then I've been trying to like maintain a semi-structured sleep schedule where like on non-streaming nights, I get 7 hours, 7 to like, I think I actually slept 8 hours last night, but like on stream nights, I'm getting done around like 3, or like I'm getting done around like 1 or 2. And then there's that adrenaline pump rush after a stream. Yeah. So I'm like knocking out more work at that point. And then when I go to sleep, I'm then up at like 6:30 the next morning and start working. So there's, small little windows, but I'll get like a nap in the afternoon. It's fine.
But do you think you're getting better with that though, with how you're structuring that for yourself? Because, I'm sure after that whole experience that it more or less kind of gave you a wake up call on how you should go about it. So, I mean, so apart from making those adjustments there, but are you still figuring out a plan to dedicate a time to, once you're done, what can I do to fall asleep immediately, so that way I don't overwork myself to the point where when I wake up I'm exhausted? Because I'm sure it takes a lot out of you, but especially coming off of that here, I'm sure there's a lot more you've learned from that to recover better from moving forward.
Well, there's been a few things. It's more so like setting a timer. So like I streamed last night. I think we wrapped up around like 1:30. Yeah, maybe it was midnight, but I was done and like in bed by 2 a.m. and then I had to be up for work at 7 this morning. So I like scheduled my alarms and I got up at like 6:45, came in, started working, knocked out everything. And then, so like kind of structuring, like I have cutoff points for like, hey, we're going to put work down and go to sleep. Just because like during the festival planning months, I would be up insomnia was hitting really, really hard. I'd be laying in bed, could not fall asleep. So I would just get up and come downstairs and start working. And just like work through the night. And then my alarm would go off for work the next day. And I'd be like, well, I guess I'll just stay up and keep doing this. And the wake up call for me was I had an investor meeting with a private equity investor. And in the meeting, I could not articulate words properly because I was so sleep deprived. And
So you sounded drunk.
not so much drunk. It was like I kept forgetting words. And so I would like pause and just be like, oh, and it'd be like just simple words like sponsorship or partnership and, like, you know, invest it, like just words that I needed to be using in the meeting. And thankfully, I had one of my sales guys with me, and the investor was like a very close friend of his. And he was, he kind of jumped in when he saw like something's not right. And so he managed to like pitch it and fully sell it. And then we followed up later, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I haven't slept in a couple of days." And he was like, "That's not good." And I was like, "I know, but we got to get this." And he was like, "No, we can't have you selling if you can't like keep your shit together." And I was like, "Okay."
Were you scared
So
at
that
that point to get into that part where you were just shutting down, where people were just saying you can't do this any further if you're not able to keep up? Were you a little concerned about that for yourself? Or just the overall process of like, I have a pitch to sell, but if I can't sell it, they're probably gonna like, think, well, is she even up to par, because her reputation is clearly not up to par at this point.
It was more of at that point, I stepped back from selling and kind of gave my sales guys, I was concerned about myself, but more concerned about the outcome of what I was trying to do. So at that point, I redirected and was just like, sales guys, you guys, here's your slide deck, your pitch, what ramifications you can like negotiate within. Anything else, call me.
So delegating, basically.
Delegating, which I'm not good at. And I just kind of then went up back to the back end of like mostly communicating via emails and trying to manage everything else that was going on. And people were like, all of my friends were very concerned. My parents were concerned. They were just like, "You're working yourself to the bone." And I was like, "Yes, but I have people relying on me and I have to get this done." And so it was more so being more concerned with everyone else around me than my own physical well-being. And there were a few instances, I think it was like after like 2 all-nighters and like maybe a couple power naps in between the days, where I was sitting here and I like staring at my computer screen, could not like remember the sentence I had read prior to the sentence I was reading. And I was like, we're not able to give what we need to give right now. So we need to take a step back, which is when I kind of pulled back from streaming, trying to stream full time, because I was like, stream can wait. I told chats, I think a couple times, I was just like, "Hey guys, like streams are going to be a little bit like few and far between right now. I'm working on this festival. I will be back as soon as I can." And so I cut out streaming, and then I'd already cut out like all of my social life. I started, cutting out like live shows, like getting booked on things and doing stuff around town, just to focus everything I had on the festival. And yeah. So with this, I guess, new time to refresh, I am making a point to like get proper sleep in the evenings. I don't work on the weekends unless it is a meeting with either people from the board of directors or it is a investor meeting with like people like to meet for brunch on Sundays. And that is just the meeting place. You go, you have brunch, you schmooze a bit, you do your thing, which I will allow myself to do that as long as I'm like resting one day and spending time with my dogs and like getting outside. I have a stricter exercise regimen now, which is nice.
So you're actually working out on a more consistent basis here?
Yes.
And to what degree?
So I mean, nothing like crazy. There's a trail near my house, which is like 2 miles one way. So like 4 miles if I walk it there and back.
With your dogs?
I don't take the dogs. No, people walk their dogs off leash on the trail. So leave them at home. But no, I go and I do that. I try to go at least 5 days a week.
Okay.
And it's like decompression time. If I
take
my phone,
does it help out a great deal? Okay.
Yeah. So I try not to take my phone, but if I'm, people expecting calls or anything like that, I'll take my phone and just either have it turned off or like turn on silent, like do not disturb, or I will listen to music sometimes. And I just like, power walk there and back and then come home and I'm like, all right, let's go.
So is that just your degree of working out, just walking? That's all you're doing, or are you doing other stuff as well too?
So I mean, I'm doing like body weight exercises as well, but
at home or at a gym?
At home.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So normally I do like a little workout right when I wake up and then right before bed.
And do you like it?
It helps at night. It helps at night. I don't like doing it in the morning. I hate waking up and then being like, all right, let's do some jumping jacks. But at night, like I've got like a stationary bike here at the house, and if like, especially when I was like just like forcing myself back into sleeping, I would get on the stationary bike and just like pedal until I couldn't anymore, and then I'd go to bed. And because I was something like, I have really bad ADD, and I used to take Adderall as a kid, and I remember going to the doctor and being like, yeah, I just can't sleep, and she was like, oh, it's probably your medicine, like just go for a run before bed and like wear yourself out physically. And so that's just something that I've, I guess, picked back up recently.
How far back did you start doing this again?
Like all of this has only been like 3 weeks.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I was trying, so the trail I walk is Vulcan Trail, and I mean, you've got a pretty good incline because it's like on the side of, you're like walking up the mountain essentially, because I live in like a valley. And I'll say one of my right hand lady for the business, she's my CFO. She and I would make plans, and we would make plans to walk the trail every day while we were working on festival stuff, and we would sometimes make it once a week. So now it's just more of a like, we're going all the time, but like getting that outside time in, getting the exercise in, making sure I'm sleeping, weekends off, which I can finally do with my job, have all been important in kind of refreshing and revamping.
So do you think it actually helped you out better once you started doing, like, you've noticed a major difference with yourself as a result of that? Okay.
Oh yeah. Like mental clarity, not, this sounds weird, but like not spiraling.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Stuff goes on. And just like, oh my gosh, I can't fix this, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, okay, cool. Let's pick up the pieces. Let's figure this out. What can we do to fix it? Like back to my normal, like problem solving versus everything's falling apart.
It's funny because I actually started exercising as of last year. So to kind of make a long story short, both my wife and I had a conversation one night, and it was one of those like clarity conversations where I'm like, oh my God, I how was I doing? It was something to that effect. I won't go into details here, but essentially what ended up happening was I literally made a decision that night to start changing everything because I was overweight at that point too. I think the most I peaked at that I can recall, I'm 5'8", so I think the most I recall peaking I was close to 250. So that was a heavy piece of shit at that point. And no, I was just joking, of course, but I'm just saying though, that was pretty heavy. And then having that conversation with my wife, because my wife started doing a lot of these hiking trails, walking trails, and things like that, and she was getting in great shape. And it's funny because I was talking to someone else, Jasmine Gillespie, this past week here, as of this recording, that I made that change, and then once I started doing that, there was a period of time where I remember I was like at a point where I just kind of wanted to go back to my old habits, and I remember telling myself somewhere in that interim that if you go back to that, you're going right back to where you were before, where you've wasted all this time you've had here and you are feeling much better. So whatever it is you're dealing with at that point, more or less kind of like get your shit together and move forward. Eventually I did, because I didn't go back to that habit. But since I've made that decision and kept with it, it was probably the biggest clarity I've ever had. And that's one of the things I remember when I was telling you before about some changes I needed to make along the way. And then I realized that I had to do a major overhaul. And that was one of the major contributing factors that helped with that as well too. Since I've been keeping up with it, I've slept a lot better because I had trouble sleeping. And then secondly, I think I'm prioritizing things a little bit much more better too, and taking my step by step. So I'm wondering, when you start doing that for yourself, are you actually kind of a little bit more methodical about how you approach things differently than you were before?
I am. I've always kind of struggled with like time management.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I have all this, I'm going to get it done. But for me, it's always been like, oh, I don't need sleep, I'll just get it done. when I'm supposed to be sleeping. With this now, I've been able, like, I've structured my days around those walks. So it's like, oh, we have to get everything from work done in the morning, and then like afternoon we go on our walk, and then evening is our decompression. Kind of like, I've been trying to read more, hanging out with the dogs more, or if I'm streaming, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays for streaming. So it's like after walk, come home, eat, play with the dogs, knock out any like admin stuff I need to do, and then it's streaming time.
Do you ever think about escalating your workout routine? Like, since you're starting off pretty basic with the walking, and then are you thinking about going a little bit further with that to try to push yourself past that limitation you're at this point right now, or are you just keeping it simple and then stick with that until you get bored of it?
I'm kind of keeping it simple right now. Like, it takes, my biggest like thing right now is I'm trying to get 1,500 or 15,000 steps in a day. Like, that's my threshold. That's what I push for every day.
With How often walking, do you get close to it?
I've been crushing 15,000. I'm staying in that 15 to 17,000 step range.
Oh, okay.
For the last 2.5 weeks. Now, granted, on the days where I don't walk, I try to at least get in that 8 to 10,000 range, but that's just like pacing around the house or pacing up and down my street when I'm taking phone calls, that sort of thing. So
do you think though that once you, because it sounds like to me that as you're moving along with things that you clearly have much more clarity, and but when you start, so having that clarity now, in this case with the workout routine you're implementing here with yourself, do you notice a major difference about how, for example, like when you're doing streaming, before you started working out, did you notice how you would look at yourself in preparation for the streaming, or how you look at the actual work in itself that maybe beforehand, that prior to working out you didn't see before, but since the workout you started noticing there's some differences about how you go look at yourself or certain things along the way?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do you mean like appearance wise, or like?
No. I'm not talking about like appearance. I'm talking about like how you look at yourself as a person. Like, before I would feel a certain way, like, for example, like myself, like before I would come on to the show or do it, I remember I was very insecure with myself, and I would purposely try to hide my overweightness. So I would wear baggier clothes to hide that. And then once I started losing the weight, it's not much of a factor, not because I look great, it's not like that, but it's more in the sense of like I feel comfortable with myself now that that's not even a thought anymore, where I'm not concerned about hiding those things, because I did lose the weight, but at the same time it was more vanity that I was approaching it before, and that's how I look at myself more different, where I'm not concerned about the way I look. I'm comfortable with myself. It sounds kind of maybe a little too generic, but that's how so I'm focusing more on the actual craft in itself rather than how do I look on camera so I can hide these little features here and there. I'm not saying that's the case here for you, but I'm just referring to like how you look at yourself more differently. And then as a result of that, because now that I'm doing this without those distractions, if you will, I can focus on the things that I realized I should have focused on more, and redefine certain things along the way that help me fine tune certain things that I didn't focus on beforehand, if that makes any sense.
It does. I think more so for me, I struggle with like body dysmorphia, and like I think like a lot of people do, especially here in like we have unrealistic body images forced on us through like the media constantly. So I've always had like this, we have to like put together, we have to have our self, we have to look good always. And not that I was like severely out of shape or anything when I wasn't working out, but when I wasn't taking care of my body and just not sleeping, not eating right, overworking myself, I definitely was more focused, or I would get more anxious when I would have to get ready for meetings or get ready for stream about like, okay, we look tired, we don't look like ourselves right now, that sort of thing. And it made the getting ready process longer, because I had to like hype myself up more, like, we look fine, look, our pants fit, we're okay, like nobody's going to be paying attention to the fact that like we aren't toned right now, like that's not what this meeting is, that's not what this stream is. And normally when I get into a meeting or stream, I'm so focused on it that I'm not paying attention to those thoughts, but it's leading up to it. Just that, I don't want to say panic attack level, because it's not a panic attack, but like that irrationally over critiquing myself, just being like, like, you're a piece of shit because you didn't work out today. Like, you haven't worked out in weeks. Like, what are you doing? And it's like, I've been practicing being nicer to myself and not, beating myself up so much.
What's your dieting look like now for you? Because you said you talk about what you're eating. That's also, you also implement that more, or you still eat whatever you want?
It's kind of, I've always been a pretty light eater. Okay. Like just like salads, vegetables, like protein, egg, like whatever I've got. Like, I cook pretty healthy anyway, but when I was working constantly, my body needed more fuel because I wasn't sleeping. So I was eating more, which was fine. It's what my body needed. But I was beating myself up for it at the time. Of like, we're not sleeping, but like, we don't need to eat, a second dinner just because we're up in the middle of the night and we're, my brain's, I'm working on that relationship with food and body image right now. It's real great.
Well, when you think about yourself back, prior to this whole change that has occurred for you, do you take the time to reflect on that, to look back on what you were doing personally, professionally, and then, with the streaming, all that? Do you look back on how you handled yourself, how you handled that? And then when you are going through it now for yourself, do you think that, are you more content and more comfortable with how you are looking at yourself now, considering that more or less the negative thoughts or the distractions, if you will, that were consuming you, seems like it's more or less been kind of removed for the most part? But do you have a little bit better view of yourself as a result of all the changes you've made, or is it just something that you kind of put on the back burner and just focus on the task in hand?
It's not, I guess, not so much the back burner. I think one of the things that I was like, I'd have like the voice on either side, and like one side is being like, oh my gosh, like, you don't work out today, like it's terrible. And the other side of me was like being like, we are working an unrealistic amount. Like, we can't expect, like, we as in me, like, I can't expect myself to be working out on top of everything else. And now, instead of that voice being like, oh, we have so much going on, it's, well, how do we feel right now? Do we feel good? Do we feel strong? Do we feel restless still? No? Okay, so we're feeling strong. We're not feeling restless. Not, I guess, like, combating that voice in my head that's looking more at my image and trying to compare myself to other, I guess, like, I struggle with comparing myself to other body types, if that makes sense, when it comes to working out. So it's like, oh, we've been working out. No, we're not seeing the results in the way that we want to, but it's like, but we feel stronger and I feel better and I'm sleeping better and I feel rested. I would much rather have this than, go to extreme measures to have a body type, if that makes sense.
I know what you're saying, but I'm actually curious about something you just said, that because and let me know if I'm wrong, and just kind of, because I want to get some clarity on it from you, because you talked about just now about like the more or less the two voices you're hearing, you're not doing this right, or you're overworked. So it's almost as if though, like, it's like a pattern you've developed through all these years where you have this more or less inner dialogue with yourself about how to go about this. And I'm trying to be very careful how I ask this here, because I don't want to imply something. But what I'm curious about with you is that's clearly a learned behavior, meaning that you obviously had gone through something that had stuck with you, and that type of thought process has more or less been the what's the best way I could describe it? Like the I hate to say it like this, but I guess the only way I can describe it is like the bane of your existence, if you will, where like, you know what you want to do, what you're wanting to accomplish, because that's one thing that I've noticed with you before, that you have a strong point of view on what you're wanting to accomplish. So the vision is there, but and when I'm listening to you say these things, even up to this point now of how you're describing yourself, it's like there's still that distraction of like the other things that's kind of more or less holding you back a little bit. So again, I'm hoping that I'm not giving the wrong impression by what I'm implying here for you, but what I'm curious about is, it sounds like to me you've kind of got a better handle on it. And if that's the case, have you noticed that for yourself about how because that's what I was asking before with you about how you look at yourself differently this time around, because it seems like that as time has gone by with something you found that is giving you the clarity, the time to be able to reevaluate yourself, to do that self-inventory, if you will, that you're starting to notice some certain details that you probably didn't notice before, or probably you did notice, but it's become such an accustomed thing for you that it just became like I'm used to that, so I don't know anything else outside of this. But now that you have time away from that to be able to reflect on those things, I tend to believe that you probably figured out that, okay, so this needs to be fixed here. So is that kind of a fair assessment to make about what more or less you're kind of going through, about figuring out what you need to work on to kind of deal with the issues you've been dealing with for at least up to this point with yourself?
Well, my therapist has been a big help.
Okay.
And I've also been focusing on, like, I've always had a very good core group of people around me that have been very supportive and positive, but also having more open talks with people about like, hey, like I mentally beat myself up constantly because I'm not holding myself to a certain standard, or I'm not reaching that certain standard that I want to hold myself to. And there have been several people that I've opened up to about that a bit recently. I say recently, like in probably the last 8 or 9 months. And I've had like one of my best friend, my oldest friend, she's kind of always known it. And she's one of those people that like, anytime I'd apologize for something silly, like, oh, I put her on hold to answer another phone call and I come back and I'm apologizing. She's like, stop apologizing. You don't need to apologize about that. Or anytime I was putting myself down or saying I'm not doing enough, she was that voice that was just like, you're doing too much. You are doing what you can. You're giving what you can. And so I've been leaning on her a lot more as of late. We just, we have our weekly phone calls, and then also kind of surrounding myself with the people that I have in the last year has also helped with that. So I've made some very good business friends, people that push me, people that support me, but also seeing how they live their lives of like, these are work hours, these are play hours. We're not going to beat ourselves up about work stuff outside of like in our play hours, and we're not going to be goofing off during work hours, if that makes sense.
I understand, yeah.
But also spending time with people that like I admired, that I slowly started realizing in our conversations that the admiration went both ways, and realizing like, oh, wow, I do a lot, and I do put a lot out there, and I am producing quality content. I am creating things that other people are respecting. And I mean, like when we have conversations, it's always so lovely to hear, but my initial instinct when anyone ever like compliments me or says what I'm doing is cool is to be like, oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. Like I just get in front of a camera and talk and like, make fun of movies, or I'm just putting on a festival. And it's like our budget now for the festival is 1.5 million. And I did it the other day. Yeah, it's real great. It's real great. It's real great. I want to throw up every time I look at our budget. I'm like, oh my God. Like, how much money is that? Like, it's just not a real number. But like with going through this process of, I've had like so many people within like the service industry, within the business and like Birmingham business people crawl out of the woodworks, and after speaking with me or taking meetings with me are supporting me, and they're pulling their contacts and being like, hey, you need to talk to this person. Like I made the right joke at the right bar at the right time to a guy, and ended up taking a shot with him and some of his buddies, and then they looked at my presentation and they called someone from the mayor's office who showed up that night and was like, all right, I'm going to set a breakfast for you and the guy in the mayor's office who does event planning so that he can meet you because he needs to talk to you about this. And the next thing I know, I'm working directly with the mayor's office after months of trying to get in contact with them. but it was just those little things have happened over the past year, and like people that I'm like, I'm just me. Like, I'm not a big deal. Like, it's not, what I'm doing isn't special, is that voice in my head. And then I've got these people that are bending over backwards to help me, you know, like having the contact from the mayor's office, like helping me with permitting, you know, helping me jump through all those like bureaucratic like hoops that I didn't even know I had to jump through.
Yeah.
Business owners that are like contacting their extended networks to help pull in things that I need. It's been a very eye-opening experience, and kind of one of those, I guess, self-realizations of like, hey, like I need to stop putting myself down, because if these people believe in me enough to help me handle this, then I need to be believing in me fully. Like I know that I can do the work, but also like putting
myself in the back in doing the work. Do you think though that I'm going to ask this question that I asked somebody else, I'm going to ask you, like, but once you started going to, you know, those highs and lows that you were experiencing for yourself, and you're getting the proper support system for what you're doing, did you ever come to that realization for yourself where you realize, you know what, I'm actually pretty good at this, and I'm actually really happy that I'm able to pull this off, and other people respect and know the quality that I'm bringing? That, look, when you came to that realization, has it ever come to that point where you had the time to reflect on that, or is that yet still the process for you to reflect on that for yourself? Because I picked up on that pretty early on when I had my conversation with you, but I'm not sure if you know, apart from what you just said now, if you actually did have the time to look at yourself and give yourself more or less the pat on the back and telling yourself that you are good at this stuff and people notice it now. So, you know, stop beating yourself up.
I feel like it's been like a fake it till you make it sort of thing. Like mentally, that like logical side of my brain.
I know what you're
like,
saying. Yeah, I know.
We got this. Yeah. The emotional side has been like, but it actually has started kind of setting in. And oddly enough, it started setting in when I started making the cancellation calls for the festival, or the postponement calls, not the cancellations. But when I started having the conversations with people that have been working with me for months, and I was like, hey, I know we were talking about doing it this June. We're moving it out a year. And there was like this part of me that it was my pride. My pride was just like, we said we were going to do it, and now it's not happening. But the number of people that, like, I was expecting so many, oh, I told you so. Oh, I didn't think you could do it, which I got several of those. But from most, like all of the people that I respect, and like the business community here in Birmingham and people that I was leaning on, everyone was so supportive, and they're like, this is a very smart move on your part. Like, good on you for making this hard decision.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, I had several people that I like look up to. They're like, I don't think I could have made the decision that you're making. Like, my pride would have made me push through. And they're like, but you're recognizing that you have to deliver this level of quality, and you can't do that with the ramifications or the restrictions that you have right now.
Yeah.
And making those calls, and like my audio technician, or my audio engineer, he's known me since I was a baby, and he was probably I was most scared to call him, because he'd like reserved all the equipment, which is like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars of stuff. And I like called him and I was like, hey, I'm gonna be pushing the festival out a year. And he just goes, all right, good on you, I'm proud of you. And I was like, what? And he was just like, you need a full year to market. And he's like, well, you have been doing some, you now have an entire year to just pack it out. And he's like, and I know that you're going to. And I discussed my plans with him, and he was just like, you know, I'm here for whatever you need over the next year. And then, you know, come festival time, we'll be able to get whatever you need. And it was kind of, again, like in those conversations that I was just like, oh, that emotional side of me started taking hold of like, hey, these people do respect me. These people are acknowledging and respecting the decision we're making, and they're not picking it apart. We don't need to be over explaining ourselves to everybody. Whenever I say ourselves, I feel like I'm like Schmeagol over here, like, we loves it, you know. Sorry, but you know,
to talk to, yeah.
I was just like, I got enough of them. But But just like kind of having those hard conversations.
Right.
Because like we did lose some sponsors that won't be coming back for the first year, which I wasn't surprised by, but we retained a lot more than I think I thought that we would, which was good. We got, our big name sponsors, with us having like pushing it out a year, just kind of having those harder business conversations and not, I don't like the word defeat because I don't feel like it's a defeat, but admitting a defeat gracefully and being respected for it was kind of, I think, that wake up call for me of like, oh no, like people don't just view you as like this weird purple haired girl that's like doing stuff. Like they're respecting what you're doing. And yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does answer the question, but I mean, do you feel more happier with yourself as a result of, going through all the stuff but you, like, when I'm asking the question, because I know you just answered it, but are you actually content with yourself with what you've learned and what you've been able to handle moving forward because of those experiences that you've had that I would say in a lot of ways made you, I wouldn't say a better person, because I think you're a good person, but more or less made you a much more patient person, if you will. So do you think you feel more happier in that sense about yourself?
Yes. There is definitely, there was like a period where when we first made the decision, we took like a 2-day, I think it was like a 3-day window. It was like we made the decision on a Thursday. We didn't do anything until Monday. And during that 3-day period, I was very unhappy with myself. I was more viewing it like a failure. And over the course of those 3 days, I kind of like flipped that narrative in my head of like, no, we're not failing. We are just redirecting. We're pivoting. I kept like, it's the Friends where they're like taking the couch up the chair or the stairs and they're like yelling pivot. That was just like what I kept telling myself. I was like, we're just pivoting. We're pivoting. We're pivoting. And we've never been good at it because we've always been very stubborn, but we're doing it. And I have, whenever I like have those negative thoughts or whenever they were like slowly like creeping in, which they were, at the beginning of this decision making, I would just start like in my head, like just screaming pivot, like they were in that skit. And I have been a lot happier with myself. I've been happy with how I have mentally handled this and I haven't laid down. I feel like it would be very easy with something like this. Like it doesn't go, you put in all this work, it's not happening the way you want it to. It would be very easy just to be like, well, we're just not going to do it.
You really do have a very strong personality from what you're describing about yourself here. And I noticed that too the first time around when I spoke with you, because that's one of the reasons why I really do respect you and admire with what you're doing, because I think in a situation like this, a lot of people definitely would have crumbled under these circumstances. And, obviously due to a forced situation, you had to pull a stop on it, but it eventually the people that got it understood it. From what you described me, they understood that, yeah, once you reach your limitation, you have to kind of pull the brake, put the brakes on it and reevaluate the situation. And I think, because I was anticipating this, to be honest with you, when I was expecting for us to have this conversation, quite frankly, I was looking for something that I could see where you have grown from the last time, where more or less you and I had spoken, to where you are with this point. And not to say, you met my expectation. It's not that, but more in a sense, like I'm very happy to see that from you, that you have grown in that sense as well. And, but I always felt like that, you have a very strong personality where I think that certainly has helped you to be able to overcome those set hurdles. And, in whatever support system you've had that you've developed throughout the years has paid off, I think, at this point so far, to the point where you've been able to delegate what you said wasn't very easy to do, has made it a lot easier for you to go through that process in the first place. So this kind of leads me to something that I actually wanted to delve further into here with you, because the last time you and I had spoken, we talked about your show, and we briefly talked about beforehand about the various things you've done differently around with the show. Do you feel any different about how the show is now since, things happen, since you kind of got back in the swing of things? do you look at the show more differently, where maybe before under those previous lenses that you had a certain perception about it, and then now you're doing it with more or less clarity? Not to say that you appreciate it more, because I'm sure you do, but I guess what I'm asking is, do you have a different perception on how you looked at the show, whereas beforehand you probably noticed something now that you didn't before that gave you a different perception and appreciation, if you will, of the show? If that helped, I didn't convolute, but I hope you understand what I mean by that.
I'm going to answer this, and I hope I'm answering your question, but if not, please tell me. There are a few different mindsets that I've returned with after like this extended period where I like was streaming, either not streaming or just like very sporadically streaming. And that has been to stop, this sounds really weird, but like stop listening to the louder voices.
Which louder voice are you referring to?
There was a lot of, when I stopped streaming, we had like several trolls that were posting on Instagram, or like when I would pop up and be like, oh, I'm streaming tonight, people would be like, oh wow, you're back. And it was just,
oh yeah, okay.
It was like, hey, like, dude, like I'm doing so much. I'm doing so much right now. And it wasn't so much that like they themselves were getting to me. It was more this mindset of like, oh my gosh, like chats are going to be upset with me. The people that,
oh, I see what you're saying,
are tuning in or expecting this Monday, Wednesday, Friday night, like I'm not there, they're mad at me. And kind of with the extended break and coming back, I have like a lot of my like chat OGs are still popping in. We have like the set people that are there just about every single stream, and being able to go on a break and come back, and these people, like this amazing community, just be there and be happy and be talking in the chats, joking with each other. Like I wasn't gone for a month, has been very heartwarming, and it kind of reset in my brain that fear of making everyone upset. Like I've just been communicating on Discord, just being like, hey, I'm going to stream tonight. If you make it great, not. And kind of having a bit more of a like fun mindset of like, instead of stressing that people are upset and mad and they're not going to come, or I'm not giving them enough of a stream, like a long enough of a stream. Because there was like some of the cooking streams, I think I was only on for like an hour or so.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, hey, I'm too tired to keep going. Whereas like now, like we were streaming last night and we finished like a few episodes, and I was like, do you guys want another one? And they were like, if you want to keep going, yes, but don't feel obligated. And so kind of not so much not taking chat into consideration because they're the reason I'm doing it, but not allowing it to negatively mentally affect me with like theoreticals in the back of my head, just because there've been a few, mean comments or DMs on Twitch or on, wherever I've been getting stuff sent, which is mostly just Facebook and Instagram, and then like 2 on Twitch, but not so much listening to those voices and letting them feed into that negative voice, if that makes sense.
It does. So, I mean, that does answer my question, but I guess with the negative remarks you're getting, are you handling that better for yourself now than what you may have done beforehand?
Yes, I'm just not responding.
Okay.
Like,
that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to explain myself. Like, if you're actually watching stream, you know what I'm doing outside of stream. You know how busy I am. Like, I understand being upset that you're not getting to like hang out in chats and watch a movie, but like I'm not the only person on Twitch doing this. There are plenty of other video ones that you can, or video channels you can go watch and hang out in. And now if somebody DM me and they're like, hey, like, we really miss your stream, like just hope you're doing good, I would respond very differently. I would actually respond to that, be like, oh my gosh, thank you. I miss you guys too. But mentally, like I get those. I used to like read whatever was sent to me. Now if it's like, if I get, if I can tell it's negative, I'm like, nah, we're good. We're not even going to finish reading it. Delete, block.
Yeah.
We don't have time for this. And not letting myself mentally dwell on it. So like, I'll be like, that's just one person. If they don't want to watch anymore, it's fine. We are communicating with chats. We are doing what we can do, and that's what we can do, if that makes sense.
So when you went back the first time after taking that long break, Were you, apart from the expectations that you were more or less, fearing about people's reaction, if you will, did you also have any fears of like rustiness, or, do I still have it, or will people still be interested even if if I still have some people coming back? Will they be interested coming back the following stream, whenever that may be, given your schedule here? So did you have a little bit of that as well too, prior to leading
Oh
up to
yeah.
that?
Oh
Okay.
yeah. I think it's like last 2 weeks have been my first like consistent Monday,
Yeah.
Wednesday, Friday. We're back. And I remember getting back into these. I was like, oh gosh, oh no. Like, do we still have it? Can we get it? And we're doing like TV, like anthology TV series right now. So it's like a little bit shorter, not like I'm kind of like easing myself back in, because like long form, like 2 hour long movies, those are a bit harder to do. So definitely felt a little rusty, but it's kind of like riding a bike, or at least that's how it's felt. Like I was first few minutes like a little clunky, like, oh, I don't know what to say, like what do I do? And then it's just like it's like that Willy Wonka tumble, like you're walking down the stairs and then you do a little kick flip and then you're like standing up, you're like, we're back, we're here, we're going. So kind of rusty, and it's at the beginning of each episode. I'm kind of like, oh gosh, are we good? Are we ready? But I'm slowly like getting back into like, no, we're good, we're going. It's fine.
Since you've been back, because I think the last time you and I spoke, I don't remember the exact details if we got into this here, but if we did, I think if I recall correctly, I asked you about your previous stuff that you do, and if you watch it. I think you said no, but since you've been back, do you look back at it and just say, hey, let me see how I do since it's been over a month? And I had a little concerns, but now that I've done it, let me just actually check it out to see if it actually turned out as well, and maybe give myself a little bit more a different perception to how to go about it now that I have a visual in front of me to see it.
I've been more so grading myself based off of chat involvement. So if that makes sense. So if like people are talking, I'm like, okay, we're doing fine. It's when people stop talking that I'm like, oh, did we do something? Did I say something wrong? Was that joke, too far? So, that sort of thing. And more so grading myself, like watching what I'm doing in the moment. I have not been watching full episodes, but I am editing and like putting everything on YouTube. So I do kind of watch snippets to like do like some of the editing there. And then I'm so sorry.
All right.
With some of the like marketing stuff that I'm gearing up right now, I'm trying to go back and like find clips of things that I like to then post elsewhere to kind of draw in more viewers. So I'm rewatching stuff to that degree, but not like full episodes.
So, but what exactly are you looking for to more or less use as a promo clip for your show? Like, so if you're not watching a full episode, because this is what I started doing differently now, and because I'm always accustomed to watching everything from start to finish. I have to, because I have, in case I have to cut something out, whatever. But I remember, like in this case, like when you and I are talking, I'm invested in the conversation, but I know in the back of my mind that I'm also on the lookout for something, like if there's something that we talk about that I can use as a clip to more or less promote the episode, if you will, I can lean more towards this part of the conversation. Then I'll filter out some of the finer details about condensing or whatever the case may be. But because I'm watching the whole episode, I know where I'm kind of leading into, so I know where to cut. But when you're doing that for yourself, how are you deciding at what clip to use as more or less the promo for the said episode, or maybe to promote the entire show, if you will?
So what I do while I'm streaming is I actually have like my stopwatch going on my phone. Okay. And whenever because I mean, like I'm riffing the entire time. Nothing's pre-planned. So if I hit a joke that I like or that chats responds to really well, I like hit the lap button. So it records those, and then I just screenshot, essentially the timestamps, screenshot it, And then whenever I go back to edit, I just pull from that.
Cheater. No, I was joking. No, I was joking. That's a good idea. I never thought of that actually.
Yeah.
But but do you ever feel compelled to watch a full episode, if you will, to get a broader perspective on how you are going about it for yourself? Because I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm not implying that at all. But I'm just curious though that, because if I haven't done something in a while for myself, I feel obligated that I should, so that I could get a perspective on how I'm going about it. But then again, I'm accustomed to that for myself. Yes. But I know other people are not. But I'm curious with you though, because I feel like you're the type of person that would do that, but considering your schedule, I don't think it permits you to do that. But if you didn't have the accumulated schedule you have, if the opportunity were given to you where you could do that without having to delay on other stuff, you think you would take that a chance to look in an old episode to see, okay, now I can have a better perspective on myself in this capacity here?
I want to say yes, but also I don't think I would.
Okay.
And I say that because I've started doing a little bit more stand-up here and there. I host
I was
a show.
Ask about that too.
Yeah. So I'm hosting a show at a cocktail bar here in town every other month. And I got pulled on to do some shows for some people. And one of them was last minute, the headliner didn't show up. They just needed comics and I was there and they were like, can you go up? And I was like, I haven't performed in 6 months. And they're like, that's fine. We trust you. Get up there. You got 10 minutes. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I got up there and I've got my set. I know, where I'm supposed to go, but you get rusty.
Right.
And I got up on stage and I did well enough that people were coming up to me afterwards being like, that was so great. You were so funny. Which is always so good to hear. But I on stage was just we didn't pause long enough after or before that punchline. That's why I didn't hit so hard. I'm self-analyzing in the moment.
Are you recording it, by the way?
I don't record my stand-ups, but
why not?
Oh God, I don't want to see that later.
Why not? Why don't you think it'd be a really? I mean, I'm not saying you should. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm actually quite surprised that you wouldn't do that, because I think that you're such a perfectionist that you would do that for yourself, that you would see, okay, what am I doing really good? Because simply going off of more or less your emotions, if you will, at least from my experience, is not necessarily enough. You actually need that visual clarity to kind of get a perspective on that. So I'm actually quite surprised that you would not do that, especially when it comes to stand-up. Because if someone is coming up and say, you did great, I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I'm just wondering, what is it about your stand-up for you that was really good? And is that the general consensus with everybody else? But if you see that for yourself, maybe your perception, which is, they thought it was funny, but I didn't think it was that funny. So I'm really curious about that, because you strike me as a person that would do it, but for you to say you will not, it's really quite surprising, to be honest with you.
I feel like I should. I have all of my sets are filmed.
Right.
There's normally I'll normally have a friend in the audience that films it, or if I think the last few that I've had filmed were actually sent to me by other comics.
Right.
They're like, oh, I filmed your set. Here you go. Because it is a common thing.
Right.
But I think for me, it's more when I'm up there, I'm listening to the audience's reactions. I'm seeing their faces and mentally notating.
I think I know what's going on now. Okay.
Yeah. So it's I'm analyzing it in the moment, and I'm and
that's good enough for you.
It's good enough for me. My thing with comedy is it's not my one true love. It's not oh my gosh, this is what I want to do with my life. I like stand up. I enjoy doing it. Every once in a while, it's fun to get up on stage and tell jokes. I really love the comedy community,
right.
But producing shows and hosting shows is what I love doing. With my comedy show right now, I'm hosting the show. And so I love that live banter versus pre-planned jokes on my end.
So you said what you're passionate about here then, but you don't go back and watch those duties, if you will. So that's the part that's confusing to me. I'm not confused, but that's the part that's a bit shocking to me, because if you're really invested in those various endeavors there, I'm not sure why you would not go back and look at that, because as self-critical as you are for yourself and the other things you do, it's almost as if though it's strictly from a POV standpoint, this is my perception here, that's good enough for me. but to get it from a different angle, I think would, considering, with the things that you do, you can see the various other things that people are doing, okay, that's not good, this is good, okay, well, we can shift things around because you have that visual. But for yourself, it's like, this feeling is good enough for me, move on to the next beat. And I always feel like when someone tells me, especially someone like yourself, that almost seems like a disservice to you, I think, in my opinion.
I do get other perspectives.
Right.
So like with streams, I have multiple people that I trust that watch streams that'll like be like, hey, like you could have done this better, you could have done that better. I think and this is like, same with my stand-up. Like I have people that go to shows and they'll be like, hey, you were a little fast on this one. I'll be like, yeah, I was speeding through it because I was worried about my time. Or, I didn't let the audience laugh that joke out before I started the next one. So they missed the first part of the next joke because they were still laughing, that sort of thing. There's like the way that my brain, it's like constantly in overdrive, like ADD, like, or I guess ADHD is what they're calling it. When I was diagnosed at 6 years old with ADD.
They add the extra letter to make it difficult, I guess. No, joking.
Just like there's constantly like, even when I'm telling jokes on stream, I'm like, oh, like, I don't like the way that we said that. Like, maybe we need to like look up if that's acceptable to say. Like, I think I said like, oh, that's an off-color joke last night. And I'm like, wait, is that okay to say that? Is that like, are we being like insensitive right now? Is that PC? Are we okay right there? And like spiraling through, like those thought processes get like shelved as we're going. And there have been times where I won't watch like a full episode, but it's like, let me go back and like watch my reaction during a specific moment. But I don't know. I think I've been trying to figure this out for a little while. Like, I hate seeing myself on camera. I hate hearing my voice.
Right. I remember we talked about this.
I absolutely hate it. So it's just like, I don't want to see myself on it. Like it's hard enough for me to like, when the last few comedy shows I've done, there have been like photographers there taking pictures and then they're sending me those pictures later. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to see that. I don't know. God, no. Delete all of those.
Don't you think that's weird though? Because I'm going to bring myself into this here, and I hope you don't mind, but it's really weird that you say that because you're not the first person I've heard you say where in this capacity you're putting yourself out there for other people to look at you, basically, right? And obviously you have that interaction with people, so there is that form of incentive for you as well too. That does help out with that process, because I would think though that if you were to do, because what I'm gathering here from you is that if it wasn't for the interactions with the people in the chat, that maybe this particular endeavor wouldn't be the same one that you probably would have pursued if it wasn't for that kind of interaction there. Yeah. So, but it's interesting you say that because, and the reason I was bringing myself is because I'll never forget the moment that I realized this about myself was when I did a video recently on Instagram. And I started doing these new segments where before it would just be like a picture, like, check this out. And then that would be it. Yeah. And someone pointed out, you got to add more flair to it. So I started adding more or less video promos, clips and whatnot. And I'll never forget the first time I did one for out of theater reaction. Not that I was banging out numbers, but it was a good amount of reaction that I got from that one video that I actually liked looking at myself doing what I was doing. Not to say that that's a good, it wasn't like that. It was more like I liked what I was doing and I saw what I was getting good at and I want to get better. So that was more like the tempo, because now I can do this. Let me see if I can step it up from here and try some new things with this and that. Yeah. And it has evolved from that point for me personally. So to hear you say that, where you have a vision on something, and I can tell you before you, I'm surprised you don't like to check yourself out in that capacity to see what you can work on or whatever the case may be, that you hate looking at yourself and you hate hearing yourself, but you do something that is constantly out there for people to do that. And I'm wondering how your brain is wired that way. I'm not saying you're wrong, so don't get that. I don't want to get that people misconstruing that, but I find that fascinating that you pick a field that you're putting yourself out there, but it's the one thing you don't like to see and hear about yourself, if that makes any sense. So I'm curious about that thought process for you.
With the festival with us, we've got more time to market. And one of the things that we were tossing around a couple months ago was doing like a behind the scenes, here's here's what we're doing. Like, come behind the scenes while we put on this massive festival. Like, get invested in it. Come, like, see the work we're putting in. If you're wanting to put on an event, like, we're going to give you tips and tricks and teach you how to do something like this. And I pitched it, I did like a soft pitch, and then I was like, well, no, like, I feel like this sounds like very much like, oh my gosh, look at all the work we're doing. It feels like so narcissistic, if that
I know
makes
I know
sense.
exactly what you mean. Trust me, I do. And that's why I was kind of embarrassed to say, I like looking at myself, but I know what you mean. But I hope I didn't come off that way.
Oh,
when I said that.
no.
So.
And like, I pitched it to the team, and everyone was like, yeah, no, that's great. You need to do that. And I was like, no, it's gonna be like all of us. And they were like, no, it's gonna be you, because this is your festival. And I was like, no, it's not my festival. And they're like, yeah, it is. This is your baby. This is your thing that you've been working on for years, and now it's coming to fruition. Like, you need to take that credit. And we started like filming those. And when I film skits, and I think I've only posted one. I have like a whole stack of them like ready to go for cult comedy. But I did like a like the Hot Horror Daddy reel, where I was like talking about Vincent Price. Yeah. So I filmed probably about like 20 or 30 of those so far, just going down the list of like horror actors. And when I film those, I'll film several. Like, I have like the script written out of what I'm going to say, how it's, how I want it to, go. And I'll film it several times and pick the one that I like the most. So I do rewatch that sort of stuff. Like, short form's fine. But like with the festival, like, it's fine. Short form's okay. Just like past that 90-second mark, I'm done with myself. I'm like, go the fuck away, Natalia. We don't want to see you anymore. So like, I could do that. And like, with like my joke telling, like, I will walk around my house practicing my bits, like, to my dogs. And so like, in those moments, I'm workshopping it, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, when I'm doing stand-up, it's repeated. It's repetitive, and it's like, I will workshop it to my dogs. I will call a friend, be like, listen to this bit, tell me if my like punches are hitting right, if my pauses are good. But like, I guess going back to the filming stuff, when we started having those conversations of like, no, it's gonna be you. It's my festival. It's gonna be me, my festival. I'm gonna be the main face of it. Having conversations with like again, people on the team, and they're like, you need to be the face of this, like. And it's again, like, people are giving me compliments. They're like, you're likable, you're funny, you can make this, the mundane stuff silly and fun, and people are going to want to listen to it. Yeah. And it's like, logically, I'm like, yeah. But like, I don't want to do that, because it feels narcissistic. It feels so much like, oh my God, look how hard I'm working. And I hate it, but I'm also like, but we have to do it. So right. that internal battle is still going on of like, again, like, I can acknowledge that I am working hard, and that all of that's great, but then it's like, then pivoting and putting it on a platform where I'm like, I look at what I'm doing, guys. Mm-hmm. It feels just it feels icky. And I think, like, again, once we start, posting those videos, and I can kind of create that community, and I have the same response that I have with cult comedy, where it's, I won't have chats on Instagram or TikTok, but I'll have like people in the comments that are regulars, or I'm assuming that's how it is for my cult comedy Instagram. Like, I'll have those names that I know and people that I see enjoying the content. And once I can see that it's bringing something positive to somebody else, then I will, I think, get more comfortable with it.
Okay.
But it's just that like initial, like, if you like,
do you,
I don't know.
Are you planning on ever? Because I know what I believe. I understand with what you mean. Now that you've kind of clarified a little bit to give me a better perception, but because I think it's one of those things where, at least this is from my perspective. For me, just having you share with what you did right now about you getting back to stand up. Obviously because it was kind of like, we need someone to fill in. Can you do it? And you had that experience, and then your hosting duties. And then the video promos you're shooting as well. From my perspective, because I've seen you do what you do on your Twitch stream, which I still believe you're very good at. And I've pointed out before that I thought from what I've seen the previous old episodes that I've come across and where you up to that point, and even up to this point that I've been able to catch up to, I know I've said before, you've gotten so much better. I think you've gotten really, really good. But at the same time, showcasing what other people can see more or less behind the scenes, where I think that if you, since you have those material out there, you ever think about, well, let me just post it up on my account to show other people that, the promo clips that I'm doing here, that if you're able to do, of course, put it out there, the stand-up. Because again, this is obviously this is your decision though, but for someone like myself who is a fan of what you do, I would like to see more of that. I would like to see what else can Natalia do outside of, cult comedy cinema. And since she's talked about her stand-up, I would like to see some of that.
Yeah.
If she's also talking about hosting duties outside of a cult comedy cinema, I would like to see more of that as well too.
Yeah.
So, from hearing that from someone like myself, and I'm sure maybe other people would probably ask it the same of you as well, you ever considered possibly putting that out there for people to check out, or are you still a little reserved about getting that out there?
With, I guess, like I said, like with the behind the scenes stuff that is going to be coming out, like we're filming those right now.
Right.
And those are more like reels, just breaking down how to put on an event, like things to think about, just, just behind the scenes, like fully. And then there's like interviews with the rest of the crew. But the stand-up stuff, it's just one of those, I don't know if it's something I'm ever going to post. Like if I get like a really good set that happens to be filmed, like maybe I might post clips, but it's one of those, I don't do it enough that it just kind of feels like, oh, look what I did, not a like.
Isn't that the point though, for you to put it out there for people to see? Because if you think about it though, again, because obviously promotion can go many ways here, but to more or less help with the brand, if you will, this is what I also can do as well too, and then more or less generate interest off of that. Then maybe other people say, well, maybe they might look at your stand up and say, hey, it's pretty funny, but you also host as well too, this Twitch stream, kind of to give that avenue, if you will. I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, do you think maybe you would reconsider?
I mean, I do. So one of the things with like posting jokes online, and I see a lot of comics that I book, and like comics have addressed it, is it takes a while to like hone and refine a joke.
Right.
You film it, you put it online, that person then comes to your show and you're telling the same set, which is the jokes that you've got posted online. They already know your jokes. It's not the same experience as it would be them hearing it the first time. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
What about improvised stuff? Like if you were interaction with the crowd where it's all mostly improvised.
Oh yeah.
Would you do something like that in that capacity under those stand-up circumstances, if you will?
Yes, I would post crowd work if it was being filmed and I liked it. I don't know where I would post it though. I'd most likely post it like under the festival page, not under like cult comedy. I have posted some stand-up stuff like on my story, like when people have like
I've seen
filmed bits of it, and I'll share them there if people tag cult comedy, because I prefer my personal page to be like, pictures of my dogs and like the pizza I ate, and then it's like and then I've got like I was like, well, hey, look, it's me and my friends just being dummies. My personal page is just like, it's a silly goose account. I'm just out here being a silly goose. Nothing is serious. It's just like the most unflattering photos I can take. Just like, just like unflattering angles. I'm just like, yep, guys, real great. Just eating, like laying on my, laying on a couch, like eating pizza off my stomach. Like that's what's on my personal page. And then like cult comedies, a bit more refined. It's like this side of things. And then the punchlines page, while it's not so much my account. I mean, it is my account. Like I've made it, I own it. It's more geared towards like lifting up everybody. And so I think if I was lifting up like the local comedy scene, or when I start, posting more local comedy scene and reels from all the other acts that we're booking, I will most likely sprinkle in some of myself into that. It's more just of with stand-up not being like a focus in my life, if that makes sense. Like it is a focus, but not.
So it's like a peripheral or supplement, more or less, to kind of help with whatever you're doing to. Okay, so you're saying.
Yeah. So it's. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, because I wanted to ask you about your stand-up then, because since you kind of more or less got back into it, kind of by default in some ways, I would say,
Yes.
right? I know you said that's not your main focus and you enjoy it, but that's not more or less your passion, if you will. But since you've gotten more or less got back into it, has that helped out in, let's say, with your hosting duties? That because if you're doing one new endeavor, does that particular endeavor you're following through here parlay with other things that maybe now that I've tried this again, I can see what I could do better in this little area that I was doing before, that this kind of more or less gave me a clarity on how I conduct myself under these said circumstances. Like, does it give a little bit of that up for yourself too, that you probably carried over to, say, in this case, your Cult Comedy Cinema Twitch stream?
I mean, riffing and like improving,
right.
And like hosting duties. So like I host a comedy show at a bar here in town called Collins, and it's like a very intimate cocktail bar. And I've got an amazing co-host, and she and I will like riff together, which like she and I are very good friends, but when you get up on stage, there's not that same energy always as what you had off stage. It's like, outside the bar before we go on, we're just, bantering back and forth, and it's great. And then we get on stage and there's just that like initial step of like, oh, I forgot there are 50 people in here right now that I have to make laugh. There's that added pressure, which with live shows and like with stand-up, the pressure, it sounds very odd because I have the same pressure with live shows, and streaming is like, I want to make people laugh. I want people to have a good time. I want them to come back, whether that's to come back to stream the next time I'm streaming or come to the next show that I'm doing. And with live shows, I get an immediate reaction of people are either going to laugh, they're going to, be silent. There's that immediate reaction. Whereas with stream, there isn't a reaction outside of chats, outside of people talking in chats. So like, I've had streams where there was only like a couple people talking in chats, but there were, 25 people watching like throughout the, like I think one of the weirdest streams I had 2 people talking in the chats. It was my moderator and one of the regulars for chats. And my congruent viewers across the entire stream were in like that 15 to 20 range throughout the entire stream. I think at the end of the stream, I'd had over like 200 people tune in. And I was like, that was so painfully hard to like keep that energy going, because there's that voice in the back of my head, like, people aren't liking this. They're not talking. They're not giving you anything. People are leaving. They don't want to be here. And then I get to the end of the stream and I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, no, we had consistent viewership. People were enjoying this. They just weren't talking. And so I think there's more of a flip flop when I'm doing stand up. It gives me a bit more confidence after like having streams like that. And it was kind of a consistent thing for a while where I didn't have as many people chatting, or if I did have people chatting, there were lulls. And so I kind of built up that confidence in myself of like, no, we're cool. We're funny. We've got this, to where when I'm doing a live show, the audience will eat you alive. Like, they can smell fear.
Yeah.
If you get up there and you're like, oh God, like, they know it. And being able to get up in front of a crowd and just be like, no, we're good. We got this. Like, we're turning on, the comedy, putting the comedy hat on, we're going. Having that confidence, I think, has come from streaming. I don't think it's the other way around.
Interesting. So this is a question I'm curious to ask you now, because I'm not sure if we talked about this before. I don't think we did, but if we did, I apologize for bringing it up again. But let's say, for example, for yourself, because you talked about that you're getting the viewerships on the streaming, like there's not much of interaction. What happened? You have those thoughts about what was going on. And then when you look back and say, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of people that are watching, but they just stayed shut and they were just watching the show. But I understand what you're saying, that they enjoy the show, but I mean, but at the end of the day, the fact that they're watching, that's kind of the general consensus you're getting, that they stuck with it, so that clearly they were invested. But I'm not getting the interaction like I would in the live cast to get the more or less the confirmation, if you will. Mm-hmm. What would happen for yourself now, with everything you've done here to this point, everything you've worked hard for, removing the festival stuff that you're doing right now, but I'm talking about everything else, hosting, the stand-up, the Twitch stream. What would you think you would do if that all had stopped, where there was no reaction, there was no investment, there was no demand, if you will, and you've got to that point where you really you worked really hard for this stuff and you were getting a momentum, and then all of a sudden it was stopped for you? What do you think you would do for yourself at that point to handle that, and how do you think you would bounce back from that? And do you think you would work back at it again, start from the ground up, or would you think you would shut down and more or less going back into hermit mode, where what do I do at this point? Like, how do you think you would handle that for yourself? Knowing the type of person that you are.
I mean, knowing the type, I'm stubborn. I would just keep doing it. Right. But I will say during the period, like during the holidays, like after October, like November, December was when my streams kind of started dwindling. And I want to say it was a Christmas Eve, I did like a cookie stream, like a cookie making stream that morning. And I hadn't streamed for like, I think a couple weeks. Also, it was Christmas Eve. I don't know why I thought it was going to be a good idea. But I got on, and the other thing was like the pipes were frozen here. Like my pipe, like thankfully, like my kitchen and my bathroom pipe, like I was fine on my half of the house, but like the internet was running so slow. Like it was probably one of the worst streams I'd had. But I had like one person watching the entire time, and like they were talking in the chats, but it was kind of like, oh God, oh no, like I've done it. I've killed my viewership from that because I haven't been on. And it was I think a couple weeks after that I finally got back on air, and there was definitely that like, oh gosh, like, are people going to show up? Are we going to keep doing this? And I had that thought process then of like,
wait, so did you wait a couple weeks because of that one experience? Were you like so
no,
nervous, or was just something in the middle you were dealing with?
Just holidays. Okay. I mean, I was like traveling, and then with the we got really bad here, and like the South is not built for the cold weather. So when the internet was just out for like 3 days, and I was like, oh, I can't stream because I don't have Wi-Fi. Which like I didn't realize that the cold could affect the Wi-Fi, but it can. I learned that this year, and that's what when I called AT&T, they're like, oh, it's probably just because it's cold, and then I'm saying this, and I'm like, that's probably not what it was. They probably just had a down wire they didn't want to fix.
Because it was too cold. That's probably why.
It was too cold. Yeah, they were saying they were like something about like, yeah, the pipes will freeze, like the pipe that the wire is in will freeze, or like And I was like, I don't think the internet's,
Well, you actually be very surprised. You'd be very surprised how this, because I used to work with a company that does a lot of fiber wiring, and the ground does get cold. I was so surprised at how hard the ground got and how cold it was. So it's, I don't think it's untrue, but I'm sure the proper insulation could help with that. But I don't know all those details anymore now. But it wouldn't be too surprising if that was the case there. So I wouldn't hold that against them too much.
I'll say I do live in like a shitty neighborhood, and they haven't updated shit for years. So that's also probably.
That's probably why too, yeah.
I'm like, the rent's cheap for a reason. But it was kind of during that time period where I did have that kind of like come to Jesus with myself of like, is this what we want to do? Like, that didn't feel too good. And I was like, it didn't feel great going back to like the first days of cult comedy cinema where I'm talking to a computer and there's nobody watching. Like, because I definitely have, like, I've stuck with stream. I mean, I still love it. I love cult comedy. I love what I'm doing. It's still a lot of fun for me. But there is that added incentive and that part of me that keeps pushing through because chats are there, because of the community that has been built around the stream. And I don't want to disappoint those people. I want to retain that community, not just for myself, but for them. Like selfishly for myself, but also because I want them to be able to like retain those relationships. Like it makes me so happy when, like, before I get on stream, there's like a little pre-stream hold screen, and like people will be like saying hey to everyone in the chats, and like I can see it. I'm like, oh my god, it's so cute. Like this makes me so happy. And then I get on and I'm like, hey guys, and it's like, so like if I completely lost that, I would try to keep pushing through to regrow that, like get it back in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But I mean, like if I was streaming for like a year and like nobody was in, I don't know if I would keep doing it. I would probably pivot into something else and try to put my energy there. Like I like projects. I like having something outside of work that I'm working on to like better myself and grow. I definitely have fallen in love with this art. I guess this
I think it's an art. Yeah, it's an art. Yeah.
Like I did a podcast for a while, which I absolutely loved that form. But it wasn't like exactly it. And then I tried stand up and I was like, oh, I like this, but like I don't love it. And then I started streaming and I'm like, oh no, I love this. This is it. This is my thing. Like and the community that's grown around it has just been incredible. So I don't know, maybe I would try streaming differently. I did try like game streaming, which is fun because I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't know, like I think it's like, it's my thing. It's my thing that I'm doing. I don't know. Like I did think about the other day, like, am I ever going to retire from this? Like, am I going to be like 40 still on Twitch? Like, oh gosh, it's my movies. But I don't know, like the internet's wild right now. I feel like there's, there would be something that would come up that I'd be like, all right, I'll hop on that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned about, am I going to do this till when I'm 40? Because I was actually going to be asking you about, because before we talked about the first time here on the show that, what your intentions were for the show, how you wanted to expand on it. Is that still more or less the same goal in mind you have, or has something changed a little bit for you along the way since all this stuff has happened to you?
It is still the goal. I think the thing for me now is over the last year, I've kind of realistically looked at how I could attain that in the timeline that I want to. I think originally I was like, yeah, I'll just get on and I'll stream constantly and just streaming will be enough. And then I realized like streaming is not enough. We have to start making reels. We have to start making TikToks. We have to start creating additional content to draw people in. And then even with that kind of like realizing, okay, well, we need more time to be able to do that. And we need more creative energy to be able to do that, which I'm still working a full-time job. I'm not in school anymore. I did one semester and I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah, I remember.
I tried so hard and I was like, yeah, I want to be one of those people that goes to school. And then I was like, nope, not a person that goes to school. But
it was a relief for you, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yeah. When I spoke with my advisor, they're like, "We'll just get you back in, just take a semester off." I was like, "Nah, I'm done. Thank you." But with my goal right now, like, and the festival plays into the trajectory. So after doing the festival, I will be able to take like an annual salary from that, and we're on a 5-year plan, so we have the next 5 years planned out festival wise. So after June of 2024, I will be able to strictly do production. So like festival production, live show production, and streaming. And I won't necessarily have to do my day job unless I just really want to.
Interesting.
And I was like, I can set myself up to where I can work, because I'm working, festival planning the last few months has been a full 40 hours on top of 40 hours. With the expectation that come June, I would be going to a like 20 to 30 hour work week post June, which would then mean I could reallocate all of that, the time that I'm used to putting into like my day job and everything else, redirect that into streaming.
So
just one of those.
does your schedule now? I mean, because you talked before about how everything kind of revolves around Cult Comedy Similar for
Mhm.
you. Is that still more or less the same goal in mind moving forward with all those different
Yeah.
changes that will be coming along the way? That you're everything that you're to be doing will be revolving around that as well too. Is that still the consistent here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like with the festival, I'm incorporating cult comedy into that. We're going to be doing 1 to 2 live shows, getting like bigger
Yeah.
guests, like big guests to come on. And then with like my time around that, just being able to focus more of my energy and time into cult comedy while also being able to maintain a job that pays my bills.
Yeah.
That I can, for lack of better terms, like I've put in so much work now that it won't be as much work later.
I see what you're saying.
I mean, like definitely like the month of the festival, I'm gonna be just spread so thin, but we've done most of the work now. So once the festival happens, post festival, it will kind of be like we've got our blueprint. We're just gonna kind of repeat it, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, and with the team that we have and the delegation that I am learning to do and bringing more people on,
Is that the hardest thing for you to do, to have to delegate? Like, is that one of the more difficult things that you are having to do on a consistent basis now? You haven't done what you do beforehand all by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest thing about that for you, though, having to delegate to other people?
It's more so just wanting to make sure that the quality is there. The
Okay.
quality and the standard. Like we've had, you're having to deal with booking agents and managers and bands, and you're having to deal with a lot of people's egos. And I've had, people that were coming on and helping, they were just like, no, like, forget them. We don't need them. And I'm like, no, we need to learn how to have like a conversation. You need to suck up your pride and your ego so that we can book this person. Like, we want this person on, we want them on the lineup, like, and not just with, booking, with, dealing with sponsors and dealing with, hiring companies that we need to do, like the porter potty company. We're getting quotes from porter potty companies that were giving us a hard time. And it was people that were going out under my company's name were either not following through or they were being snarky when people, it's just kind of like managing that. And it was like, at first I was like, I'll delegate and you guys do this. And then I was seeing what was happening and I was like, oh no. And that was on me for hiring the wrong people, but it was a learning experience for everybody. And so just kind of wanting to assure that, like, the biggest thing for me is like making sure that we treat people properly. Like I think I talked about this in our last interview, but like one of the things with my dad's company and the reason that I am able to use his contacts from the industry, the audio industry, is because of the way that he treated people. The respect and the quality that he provided still holds true. Like people still know who he is and people still respect him. And that respect has been passed down to me to where I'm getting opportunities that I should not be getting with the background that I have, just because people know that I carry that same work ethic and that same demand for quality. And I guess like the way that I treat people, I'm like, I'm going to treat you well. I'm going to take care of you.
Right.
Like, so that is the hardest part with delegating, is like, because I brought people on and they're like, we don't need to be paying, like, I can get you a cheaper guy to do your audio. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to use my audio guy. I've been using him for years. He's always taken care of me. I don't care if your guy can do it for 10,000 less. My guy's better. And we're getting a family price. And having
but the loyalty is still there for you given the circumstances here. Okay.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and the loyalty is it's not just with like the audio engineers. Like, I'm a very loyal person, almost to a fault. And having that expectation within business is something, like, people are coming in and they're like, no, just, I can get it cheaper. And I'm like, I don't care about the price, I care about the quality, and I care about being loyal to people that were there for me years ago when I was starting events and gave me a chance when no one else did, and that sort of thing. So I guess delegating. I don't know. I don't know how I got on this rant, but
No, you're getting into a good point. But this is interesting for me though, because I hope it's a fair question to ask you.
Yeah.
Because you talked about how demanding you are, and I understand the reasons why you pointed those out because of what you're just describing here. But but I'm curious about two things here. You can answer in any way you want if you want to. But do you think that apart from being a demanding person, do you have a temper? And the temper that you have you ever had to use it? And if you ever used it, what was that experience like for you to determine, how to go about in more or less passing along the expectations that you have of other people to do the job? Because if you said before that I've hired people and I made the mistake of hiring people that I thought would be able to do the job, and they're coming back to say, well, I know somebody who can do it cheaper for you. Nope, I'm going to stick with this because this works, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I would think that at some point there's some escalation that comes on the way that, you might have to put some people in their place.
Yes.
So how do you go about and do that for yourself? And do you think, and again, do you have a temper? Then if that temper more or less, do you know how to control that in a situation where you're stuck? Because you say you handle stress very, very well. I do believe that, but I'm wondering where that limitation is for you before you more or less explode, if you will.
I do have a temper. It takes a lot to get me there.
Okay.
And I don't blow up. I don't do well when people yell at me, and I'm not going to yell at people. I just get very blunt. I had an instance where, he was a friend. He still is a friend. We actually spoke earlier today. He was getting advice on some business stuff that he's doing, and he came on to work with us. And I remember it was like a few weeks into working. He had a task that he was supposed to do, and I was like, it was data collection for me was what he was doing. He had a list of I think it was 700 businesses, and I was like, here's where you find the information I need. These are the job titles you're looking for, and I need their contact information. Start go at them. And a few weeks in, we were sitting there and we would have big work sessions, and he was just like, yeah, it's so exciting to work with you. You're a shark, and I can't wait to it's so cool to see you working these angles with people. And he's like, you talk so directly to people, which is, we live in the South, people like to sugarcoat everything, and I'm like, we're not doing that. You're either in or you're out. And which is why I have sales guys now, because that's not what sales is. But from a business standpoint, I'm just very blunt. And a couple months go by, and I had given him this task to do, and I was like, I'm going to need it in a couple months, but this is what I need you to work on right now. Just data collection, super easy, knock it out. And a couple months go by, and I'm ready for that data collection to then feed into the next thing that I'm doing. And I hadn't really been checking up on him because I should have been. I should have made time to do it, but I didn't. I was trusting him and dealing with everything else. And I go into the file that he's supposed to be working in, and there's nothing there. And I was like, okay. And so I called him, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he had a lot of personal stuff going on, and he was just like, I just haven't been able to get time to it. And it was just excuses. There was no apology. There was nothing. And I was like, okay, hey, as your friend, okay, but I need you to fix this. Can you do it? Can you do this work? Yes or no? And he was like, yes, I can. Another week goes by, and it's just more excuses and excuses. And I was like, okay, we're having a work day. Come sit with us while we work, knock this out. He showed up to the work day, didn't do anything. Talked about everyone else is working, and he's talking about personal stuff. And I'm like, I'm getting there. The temper's rising. And he kind of went and sat by himself, in the venue that we were all sitting in, just to kind of work. He's like, I think maybe I just need to not be with people. And I walked over after about an hour, and I was like, hey, what have you done? I was like, I need this stuff now. And then it was just excuses started. There was no apology. And I was just like, hey, look, as your friend, I love you, and I am so sorry for everything that you've got going on. But as your boss right now, I don't care. You're either in or you're out. And if this can't be done by the end of the day tomorrow, I'm replacing you. And he was just shocked, didn't say anything. We spoke obviously he didn't get it done by the next day. And my she's not my CFO. She kind of stepped in and was talking to him and was like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "I've just like Natalia's never talked to me like that." And he was like, "She didn't yell at me. She didn't raise her voice. She was just very calm and just like." He's like, "I've seen her talk to people like that on the phone, but like I've never been on the receiving end of that, and that wasn't fun." And like we talked about it later, and like we've laughed about it. We've made our amends. But he was, I told him, I was like, you were talking about like it was so fun to like, see me be a shark to other people, but like you're in the water with a shark, and like while you were fine, when I thought you were doing your job, you didn't do your job, and you get that side of me. But I do try very, very hard not to be mean.
Explosive.
Yes, it's not. I don't get vindictive in work. I don't take things personally. I am that person that like I said that to him, and then we went to another bar, and I was like, "Yo, we're just gonna have drinks. If you want to come, have a drink and decompress." And I have not met very many people that can do that with me. Like I have met people that I've worked with where we have had like business arguments, and then it's like, "Are you hungry? Let's go get food." And so it's
no, sure.
like, what are we doing? What's going on? So to say like I do have a temper, I do get frustrated.
Right.
But I am working on, I understand that my work threshold is not normal. Like it's not normal to be like, yeah, I'll just not sleep for 2 days and knock out all this work.
You think you're very demanding? Are you a very high demanding person in expecting other people to, because I think the last time you and I had spoken, I think you kind of more or less indicated that you don't trust people, but when you don't trust people in a business sense, it's obviously different. And I understand the reason why you pointed out why it's hard to delegate because of quality and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you have to delegate the jobs to other people, are you setting the expectation that this is what we needed done and it's got to be done by within this, whatever the time frame is? If you cannot do it, let me know now before we get moving, because if not, you're out the door. I mean, do you have a little bit of that established ahead of time?
A little bit. I am a lot more, I set very reasonable, and as my CFO kind of, she is the person I run everything by. I'm like, am I expecting too much? Am I setting like too high of goals for people? I run everything by her because I'm even in meetings, like she'll attend with me and I'll be like very blunt. Or like one meeting and this guy was just like, "You're very intense." And I was just like, we got out later. I was like, was I being too intense? I was just making eye contact. She was like, "No, I think it was a meeting where like the other party involved had messed up and I think they were just nervous." But she was like, "You weren't too intense. You weren't asking too much. You were giving very reasonable expectations with reasonable timelines." So I try my best to be accommodating.
Right.
But I am very much, especially after the experiences that we had early on that with the festival planning, which did set me back a few months, with trusting people a little too much. I am very blunt about like, hey, if you can't do this, cool. We'll either find you something else or I'll bring you back on later when I have something that you can do.
That's nice.
Which is, but like once somebody says they're doing something and they understand my expectations, they say that they can live up to them. Like I'm expecting things to be done. And if not, I, at the very least, expect communication. Like that's my biggest pet peeve when it comes to like business or like, I mean, like I view comedy as business. Anything business related, like I expect communication. I'm expecting like if somebody's not meeting a deadline, I need to know in advance, like not the day it's supposed to be done. Like I need you to like tell, like, because the thing for me is like if that guy had called me like a week before I found out that it wasn't done, what he was supposed to be working on for 2 months, if he had like been like, "Hey, look, like stuff's been really tough, I haven't done any of this," I would have been like, "Okay, well, can you do it? If you can't, we need to figure this out." Instead of, I don't want to say that he was lying because he wasn't directly lying. He wasn't saying that he was doing it or anything, but
he was he wasn't admitting to everything.
Yes, he
So he
wasn't.
left out a lot of important details other
Yes.
than the excuses.
There was a lot, there wasn't transparency.
Right.
And that's my biggest thing. Like, one of my sales guys that came on, like, he understands, like, I have high standards for what we're doing.
Right.
And I asked him, I was like, why did you, like, you have a good job, why are you doing this? And he was just like, you were one of the most pragmatic people that I know, and I know that with something like this, you're going to do what you have to do to make it succeed, but you are going to treat everyone along the way fairly. And if I put in work, I know that you are going to pay me my dues. And so I like to think that I'm not mean, but I am. I have expectations and I have standards.
So it's interesting that you pointed all that stuff out, because to kind of go back with what I said to you before about how what you talked before, that you don't look back at your reels, or not reels, I meant to say your episodes, your comedies and whatever else. It's starting to make more sense to me now, that because I told you before, I think if you do that you would have a better perception of yourself under those circumstances. And then obviously you're not going to record a meeting and say, let me look at how I did that. That's obviously not the case. But I always figured that for someone that looks back at themselves in that capacity, they have a visual of like, okay, so I know where my ticks are. I know where the lows are and so on. Like you have those visuals to see, the various wavelengths you go through, if you will, in that various capacity. You're looking over here. And then when you have other people that are telling you one thing and you say, am I really like that? And someone has to reassure you, say, no, you actually work quite fair, X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth. Which is why I'm very surprised, even though you've already explained yourself to me about that, which I appreciate, but I'm still genuinely surprised that you still have to question yourself, like, am I these things? Am I really not? Am I behaving this way? Because you don't strike me as a person that would, be belligerent or more or less vindictive, if you will. I think because from what you described before, in the first conversation, even up to this point now, you always do strike me as somebody that would be very, very fair, cordial, and understand the separation of business and pleasure, whatever the case may be. And then for you to still question yourself under those circumstances, knowing how you are, that part still kind of boggles me, if you will, because I'm not saying that's an insecurity thing. I'm not saying that at all. I just think that without those visual standpoints of looking at yourself like that, I honestly do feel that if you look at yourself from that perspective, there might be a different perception of yourself, that you realize that now I get it. Now I can see where the highs and lows are for me in these circumstances, then kind of parlay that more or less to anything else. I'm not saying it's going to be the case, for every single thing you do, but I think that's how I kind of look at it for myself, for how you view yourself under those circumstances where you have those self-doubts, if you will, but then someone comes and says, no, you're doing fine. And that's your reassurance right there. I understand it and I do get it, but I feel like that sense of confidence, that work ethic you have, that pride that you have, if you will, I felt like would have parlayed into knowing that I know my limitations. And when I'm at that point where I don't know, then I'll ask. But otherwise, as far as what I'm doing here, I know where I stand and I don't have to question it or for anybody else to confirm it for me, if you will.
Yeah. I think it's more, for me, I grew up in a household where yelling was normal.
Yeah, me too.
And there was a lot of like introspection, like in my early 20s, where I, in my own relationships, was like, oh wait, like this isn't normal. It's not, you don't like yell at people. And I had, people at the time that weren't the best people to be in my corners, that would constantly tell me, like, you're really intense. Like, this is a lot. Like, you're being a lot. And I think that fed into an insecurity that is still there.
Because you heard it constantly, right?
Yeah, it's just a constant, like, and I mean, like, I'm a very, like, visually loud person. Like, I've got purple hair. I wear lots of jewelry. I love wearing, like, fun, funky clothes when I'm going places. Like, I love bright patterns. I, like, enjoy that side of things. And I enjoy, like, being seen, if that makes sense.
But
like,
you don't like to see yourself.
I don't like to see myself. But, like, And I don't want to be the center of attention, but like I do want someone to be like, "Oh my gosh, those are cool shirt. Those are cool shoes." I'd be like, "Yeah, I know." And
But isn't that kind of a weird juxtaposition about how you present yourself and how you like to receive that information, but you don't like that's the
they contradict each other.
Right. It's a very contradictory thing. And that's the part that and again, I understand with where you're coming from with that, but it's like you have all the confidence is there, but it sometimes I think it's placed in other areas where it doesn't have to be there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And again, I hope it doesn't come off of me. It's like, you should do, because I'm not. But what I'm trying to imply is that I see all the strong points you have, and then I see the contradictories that you also have. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just baffled by that mindset that you have, where you have all those qualities, but yet you don't like to see those qualities in yourself, if that makes any sense.
It does. I don't know. I think
and those qualities you have are really, really great about, what you do. And the but it's not just the quality of work that you provide, but it's the what's the word I want to use? It's like you have the authenticity behind it. I do good work, but I want to say thank you for helping me do the good work as well too.
Yeah.
And because of that, I want to pay you and compensate for what you've done, but do it in a fair manner. So you take the time to consider the work that went into that, and then you understand, but this is what you're owed though. But because you've done this, I'm going to give you a little extra now because of that. You have those great qualities about you too. But again, as I said before, not to repeat myself again, but you it's there, but for some reason it's like you don't like to see it, but you want people to point out, you have great hair, by the way. Like, you see what I'm saying? So that's the part that's a little, I hate to say like this, but contradictory, but not in a bad way. I'm not trying to say like that terrible of you to do. That's not what I'm saying. But I understand. I hope you understand what I meant by that here too.
I think, like, my therapist and I have been talking about this. It's been real great. She's gonna be like, "Hey, go listen to this episode. You should go watch this." And she'll be like, "All right." Just get some free therapy out of her. But I grew up with my dad was in the audio industry. Right. He toured with like you name a band from like in the 80s into the early 2000s. He toured with like Grateful Dead, Widespread Panic, Rolling Stones. He did the Grammys, he did the Emmys. And I grew up hearing about all these incredible people and these larger than life figures. And my dad would always speak so highly. Like, I remember he was touring with Taylor Swift back when she first started.
When she was a country star.
Like when she was like super, super young. And I want to say it was like one of her first tours, like first like big tours. And they were traveling with her. My dad was praising her because her parents wouldn't let her eat dinner. Like, she would wait until all of the crew had come in and gotten their dinner and sat down and eaten, or like meals or whatever. And then she would, take her meals. Obviously she wasn't lacking. They weren't like, you can't do anything, but her parents were keeping that, they were instilling that like humbleness into her. They were instilling that, respect for other people. And like, I would hear stories, not just about like Taylor Swift, but like about bands along the way. Like, the people that my dad always spoke very highly of, that my granny and pop always spoke very highly of, were those people that were not full of themselves. They were looking out for people, and they had the confidence in what they were doing, but they weren't like, "Oh my God, look at how amazing I am. Look how cool I am." Like, there's just that like earned confidence that's there.
Right.
And, but on the flip side of that, I was also hearing like horror stories about just like people sounding entitled and, I remember like I think it was like NSYNC or the Backstreet. It was one of the boy bands from the 90s, like that I was like, "Oh my God, I love them so much." And my dad was like, "You can't listen to them anymore because they're assholes." And then just like,
bummed out to hear this too.
I know.
If it's NSYNC, I'm gonna let her know. It was NSYNCs were jerks.
I will text my dad and I'll let you know which one it is.
Okay.
But it was just like just like screaming at the crew because like they didn't have the right. I don't know what it was. It was like they were just screaming at the crew for no reason. And I've seen, like, working in the service industry, just you see this level of people feeling entitled and treating other people like crap. Yeah. And I think one of my biggest fears is ever coming across that way. And I think that's why like especially in business meetings when we come out.
So it's hesitation rather than more, because I understand what you mean by that now. I think I have a better grasp of it here, because you have those qualities, but it's like you're concerned that I just don't want to be I don't want to be an asshole, so I'm going to do this so people can talk nicely of me. It's almost kind of that effect is what I'm getting. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Not so much talking nicely. I think the biggest thing for me is if anything's going to be said about me, I want it to be that I am a fair person.
Right. But I think what I'm trying to understand is that, like, because I maybe I'm not articulating it very well as I'm trying to speak on it, but it's like there's something that I understand, but I don't think I fully grasp, where you have those qualities that we talked about, and the concern is something else rather than just be comfortable with yourself, if that makes any sense. I think that's what I'm trying to comprehend a little bit better, where that's where the wedge is between the, because you have those good qualities. So it's obviously something you're working very hard on to get to respect other people. It's obviously you're very aware of that, but it's like not I don't think it's a fair comparison to make, but it's the only one I can kind of give an example for you to understand where I'm coming from with this here. It's like I liken it to somebody who is, I know it's good to feed the poor, but record me as I do it, please.
God,
no, I'm not saying that to you. That's why it's a horrible. I trust me. I know I'm terrible with that, but I didn't know any other way to kind of get my point across without, because I'm trying my best to fine tune that, but unfortunately that was the only one I can think of here. But so I apologize for the bad comparison. But what I'm trying to imply here is that there's something else that I feel like there's going on that is blocking you from being fully comfortable with, I'm a good person and that's important to me, and I don't have to worry about those other factors that kind of pull me back a little bit, if that makes any sense. Is that
yes.
Okay.
It does. I'm gonna try to explain this as I'm mentally figuring it out.
And I try to ask the questions I try to mentally figure out as well too. So we're both in the same boat.
We're here. It's great. So like mentally, I am a good person. I'd be like, I'm amazing. I'm great.
No, I know what you're saying.
I'm a good person. I feel like I have a good, strong moral compass. I'm a very loyal person. I think my biggest fear is I know that I am very blunt and I am very outspoken.
People misconstrue it.
People can misconstrue it.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out here. That's what I'm saying. Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. Okay, I get it now.
I live in the South, and there are very not to be like it's mostly just dainty Southern belles down here, which it is to a degree. But
I love that part of the culture, honestly.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like I love a good Southern, I love a good little Southern belle moment. Yeah, but like I'm not a Southern belle. If you can't, I can do the voice, but that's about it. And so there is a level that I've had to learn with a level of restraint that I have had to learn within business here in the South. Like, I guess the meeting that I was in is the perfect example. I was in a meeting. The people we were having the meeting with had messed up. Not them directly, but people under them that I was working with had messed up. They'd made promises that they couldn't follow through on. And to put it bluntly, they had just royally screwed me. And I came to the table with solutions to the problem, but I was not there to hang out and talk and chat. I'm like, we're here to talk about business. Let's go. And when we were kind of negotiating and going back and forth on how we were going to solve the problems, I was very blunt and that's not going to work for me, but I would be willing to talk about doing it in this way. And I could tell that the people that I was having the meetings with, that both of them were very uncomfortable, because I don't think that they were used to somebody being as direct.
They're comfortable being appeasing rather than kind of get to the source. Yes,
it's more just there was a short apology and accountability, which I was like, I appreciate that, but the best apology is change behavior. So going forward, we will see.
It's funny you said that. Yeah. It's funny you say, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's funny you said it because you talked about before about how you apologize for the littlest things. And then here you are saying, well, the best apology is a change of behaviors. And I'm wondering that's the disconnect that I'm noticing here too. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was interested that you pointed that out just now. Yeah.
So, but it was like in that meeting, I was being very direct the way that, like my coworkers are. Like I'm used to seeing, and I hate being like, oh, it's the man and the women thing, but it's not the most common thing here in the South.
Right. I know what you mean by that.
Women to be direct and like, no, I'm not going to placate you. Like, we are here to talk business, straight to the point. I have things to do. Let's go. And I've found that when I am more blunt and just like straightforward, it's not received as well. So especially in like those situations after those meetings, I'm like, am I being too blunt? Am I being too, am I not fluffing up enough? And that's when my business partner is like, well, I mean, we could be a little bit nicer, not nicer, but like we could, be a little bit lighter, I think is the term.
I'm going to be honest with you about this. And I hope you don't mind me cutting you off here, but don't change that at all. That's my honest opinion. Do not change it at all, because the very same people that are probably accustomed to being, massaged in the situation, will probably be the same people that will go to a restaurant and feel entitled, like, well, the food is not cooked the way I demanded it, and then they become rude to the waiter and make all these demands or whatever the case may be. So for someone in your position to come out and that has the ability to say, you know what, X, Y, and Z, and if you can't meet these demands, let me know now. We'll get somebody else to do the job, and I'll find something else for you, because you're trying to be accommodating in that sense, but you're telling them, but this is not the place for you. So either pack up and leave, or find a solution to resolve this issue here. And if you start to, in my opinion, to lose that by having someone tell you, yeah, you want to try, fuck them. This is the way I see it.
Yeah.
I understand, you don't want to, believe me, I really do. I understand that. But that quality you have is something that I think you should still retain, because if you lose that by trying to soften the situation, because you're still a good person at the end of the day, you recognizing that you've done the work, I'm going to reward you for that. And because you've been helpful, I'm going to be loyal to you, as long as there's no burn bridges between us. If it doesn't work out, I understand that's business. It's okay. We understand. I have that mind. That's the reason why I say don't change that at all, because you already have that in place for you, because you've understand the value behind that. So if someone's telling you, yeah, you may want, give it to them straight. That's just my opinion on the matter. You do what you got to do, but I think if you keep that and retain that, your work and your resume speaks for itself. They say, well, why is she so direct? Well, have you seen her work? What has she done? And people will say, she's done this, that was all her. Yeah. So if she's telling you to do these things, it's for a reason. If she's asking for your help, it's because she knows she's reached her limitations, and she's smart enough to understand about, okay, so this will work, and we'll bring the right people to delegate, because she's also doing that as well too. So she obviously knows what she's doing. So let her do her thing, and they will give you the benefit of the doubt by default, obviously, because they are not accustomed to that. But I don't think you should lose that, and I don't think you should listen. That's just my thoughts. If I was your advisor, I'd say, fuck those assholes. Let them figure it out for themselves, because if they're there, they were there for a reason. That they can't handle it, they can just walk out the door, and someone else will fill in and do a better job than they were going to do in the first place. The way I see it.
No, I will say this mindset when it comes to business was very hard earned. There's a lot of, bumps and scrapes along the way. And
I'm sure there were.
Getting to this point has also been just a lot of, for lack of a better term, just getting screwed over.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm fed up. I'm not going to, again, like, I'm not going to fluff things up. I'm not going to be lighter. I'm going to be direct and straight to the point. And it is definitely it's my business style. But I think for me, it's more of like, I've gotten so comfortable in it that there is, in my opinion, a line where it goes from being respectfully blunt to like disrespectfully blunt.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think you understand the difference though. If someone is crossing the line,
Yeah.
that you'll know when to when it would escalate. But I think you'd be smart enough to know that if I can avoid escalating to that, I will
Mhm.
do that. But I kind of I remember it's like the thing with Tom Cruise where but that audio that leaked out where he's flipping out on the crew for not following COVID protocols.
Yeah.
It was, and he let them have it. And I honestly don't have a problem with him doing that at all because if they were fucking up and holding the production for not following the protocols, then he's got to give it to them straight. And if yelling at
Yeah.
him is going to get the point across, then by all means do it. So that's the way how I see it. And I don't see
Yeah.
any harm in doing that at all if you were to do that as well. I'm not saying I would like for that to happen, but
Mhm.
if it were, I think you'd be smart enough to know how to execute that if necessary.
So I very much just, I think for me, my mindset is not so much in like, oh gosh, like I don't want to be that bluntness. It's more of that internal fear of, I don't think overstepping is the right word, but it's, growing up again, like in a household where there's a lot of yelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You don't want to repeat that habit
I
you
don't want to
had.
repeat that
Yeah, I know what
habit.
you're saying. I know what you
And,
mean.
it's kind of that, it's not so much like, oh my gosh, did I do okay? As it's more of a like a workout buddy, like, hey, just checking in. Was that all right? Was I,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Um,
sense.
so yeah, I think that's where that goes.
I'm actually, I was really curious because I wanted to have the conversation with you too because you went to England last year,
Mhm.
after you and I spoken,
Yeah.
because you were making your way to England and you
Mhm.
posted some videos here and there. And I think at one point I remember you had pointed out about, I really want to stay here because you love the
Yeah.
landscape, among other things as well too. And I think if I recall correctly, in one of your streams last year,
Mhm.
you had I think if I heard correctly, you are also a British citizen
Mhm.
too, and you made a comment about you still pay taxes because you're a citizen over there as well
Mhm.
too. If I recall, okay,
On our income that comes in the UK, yes.
right, okay. So what I was curious about with you is because I've never been to England, and
Mhm.
I love I you have to understand I love the British culture. I
Mhm.
love it with a fucking passion, and the lifestyle that have come to admire so much from the various people that have come across it that are British that have come here, sharing their stories and or the various other films as well too,
Mhm.
the entertainers out there as well. Um, and my favorite football club is Chelsea Football Club, so clearly my admiration is very much invested into that. But I always because I talked to my wife about this as well because she's from Spain but she
Mhm.
wouldn't want to go back to live there
Yeah.
anymore. She loves it here so much. But with you though, when you started, because you talked before last year with me about how you wanted to move to New York or LA or other places that would give you more or less an opportunity to kind of expand the brand, if you will. And then when you mentioned that about should I stay here or should I move here,
Yeah.
a part of me wondered, were you serious or is it just more about the moment that you admired from what you're seeing? Then as soon as you came back here, were you like, no, but I love it here more?
Yeah. Oh, so with me moving to the UK, it has definitely been a thought process for a while. Like my family lives over there.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up here in the States.
Yorkshire, is that right?
And Leeds.
And Leeds. Okay, thank you. That's in the Midlands, right?
It's up in like northern UK or
Oh,
like
okay, okay,
mid northern, like mid, yeah, kind of Midlands.
okay.
I'm real bad with geography. Um, but like I grew up here. It was like essentially just like my parents, my sister, and I, and like my granny and papa lived in Decatur, which is like 2 hours away from Birmingham. So like they were around a lot, but it was like that was kind of the bubble that I grew up in was my parents and then my grandparents, my granny, my papa. My mom's family lived in the UK and she has two brothers and they both have families. Like my Uncle Tony has a son my age and then a son my sister's age. And then my Uncle Andy has three kids who are kind of, I think Lisa's like 8 years younger than me. And then they kind of tear down from there.
Mm.
Um, and whenever I visited the UK, like there's this sense of like that close family, like upbringing, like they all live in Leeds, like in different neighborhoods, but like they have big family dinners, they do holidays together. And there's that, there's those like relationships between my cousins
Like
that
the
like
bond.
there's that bond that's there.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm there, it's extended to me. It's like, you know, we never left. And I absolutely love that family dynamic over there. I love the British culture. I love how leisurely it is over there.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would move anytime soon. The next move for me will be here in the States.
Well, why is it not for you to consider as England to be a destination as a potential place to live in, as opposed to moving somewhere else here in the States? Because if you have a strong connection, is that not? I'm not saying that's not a motivating factor for you, but outside of that, is that the only motivating factor if you want to move there?
I mean, the work lifestyle in Europe as a whole is a lot more laid back. They don't really have so much of like the hustle culture that we have here.
Mm-hmm. And you prefer that here over there?
It's a love-hate relationship. I'm a workaholic and I'm like, I need to get away from this, but I'm also like, this is my shit. Sorry, I keep cussing on your show.
No, it's okay. I cuss all the time. It's all good.
So there's this part of me that, like what I built here in Birmingham, as far as like my business reputation and the fact that like, I'll be very honest, the venue that I'm putting my festival in, like I went to them and I'm like, hey, crazy idea. Can I just essentially close off your business for 4 days and put on an event? And they were just like, yeah, we trust you. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I mean, like I made a PowerPoint where I'm like, this is how I'm going to do it. And they were like, great.
I like how casual. Yeah, sure. Why not?
I mean, it wasn't like that casual. Like they're definitely, and then not to say they weren't, it was like, it went through multiple people.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I mean, the fact that they were so willing to just say like, yeah, no, we're here. We'll help you. What do you need from us? And not just them, but like the businesses that I've been leaning on within Birmingham to like pull this off. Everyone's like, yeah, what do you need? How can you do this? Leaving that support system. Like if I was to find like a corporate job, like a position, I'm like, oh, I love logistics or I love operational logistics.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get a job and just do operational logistics. I would be fine moving to the UK and getting a job doing operational logistics where I could live comfortably, be around my family, that sort of thing. Whereas my brain, the way it works is if we just stay here and we bust ass for the next, couple years, we can then get enough money under our belt to where we can go stay in England for 3-week stints, 3-4-week stints, travel around, see family, see friends, experience that, establish myself a bit more over there in those, visits, then come home, keep working, keep saving up money, getting to a point where being able to travel and spend time over there isn't like a once every other year sort of thing. It's an annual trip, like a pilgrimage that I'm taking every year to go see family, that could eventually then turn into me wanting to live there like full time. Not wanting, but turn into me living there full time, because I do want to live there. I love it. It's kind of like, it's like visiting like your hometown after a long time. Like whenever I'm in, which England's an entire country, but whenever I'm in Leeds, I'm like, oh, like this just feels right. This feels cozy. This feels like home because I grew up. That's my grandparents live there. My family's all over there. But I do think, especially like with wanting to do festivals, at least for the first few years until I have some under my belt, I don't think it's something that a blueprint that I could take to the UK, just because I haven't done it yet. Like I have done things similar to it, but I haven't done this yet. So traveling across the world to a place where I don't have the support system that I have here would make that harder, which would then turn mean that I would have to find another route, which I don't want to take right now.
You know what's interesting for me to say about the more or less the closeness that you have with your family over in England, and the sense of home that you get, that feeling of yourself, sense of home you get when you're over there. It probably sounds like it to me. Let me know if I'm wrong. When you're over there, you feel more at home than you probably are here. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yes.
So this leads to my question though about that, because when you talked about just now how you love that closeness where, you don't live there, but when you visit, that extension of like, you're part of the family, obviously you are, but you're part of the family, and there's that bond that's obviously developed there throughout the years, and it's still very much intact. When you're over there, though, does your perception about what's more important to you differ as opposed to when you come back here? So, for example, you come back here, you talk about, and I understand with what you mean by that, where this culture here in America is very hustle and bustle. Some parts here and there can be much more relaxing than others. There's no doubt about that. But when you're pursuing your goals here about, in this case, the festival called Comedy Cinema, among the other things you do as well too, you're just constantly going, and then you're over there. It seems like that was the only time where you are decompressing.
Yeah.
Where there's none of that rush, if you will. So when you're over there and then you come back here, does your priority change a little bit about what's really more important for you? And then I'm assuming that when you come back here and then you're right back in the swing of things, I'm not saying you're forgetting it, but I'm curious if it's more like a back burner where like, I had that experience, but now right back in the swing of things and let's move forward right now. And then it's almost as if though it's non-existent for you, if that's kind of a fair assessment to make.
It's not so much that it's non-existent, or so much that it's on the back burner. I think if anything, it kind of pushes me to work harder. Like I have like my parents and my sister live here, and I have like my group of very close friends, which are like my family here that are in the Birmingham area. And I have, friends all over the country that I'm like, oh, if I moved to England, I wouldn't get to see you guys, but like every few years. And it's already like once a year that I'm seeing some of these people. So I think there's just one with going to England, there's this sense of nostalgia. Like you're going to your grandparents' house and like, my parents moved out of my childhood home years ago. My granny and papa's house, which was in Decatur, my parents sold that when we had to put my granny in a home. So it's almost like England and like my family's homes over there, kind of like the last remnants of my childhood, if that makes sense.
Interesting, yeah.
Which I never thought about growing up, like, oh, how hard that was going to be. And so like my house feels like home, like I made it my little space. But I think that like with going to England and kind of having those decompression times and the, the camaraderie between me and my uncles and my cousins and my, my aunts, my babcha, it's just, I think it's a little extra sweet because it wasn't as, they weren't readily accessible for me growing up. Like I know that some people are like, oh yeah, I only saw my grandparents like every once in a while. But like I saw my granny and papa like every other week. I was at their house, once a month growing up. There was a very close bond there between me and my dad's parents. Whereas like my babcha and my jadek and all of that family lived on the other side of the world and we would see them every other year. And so there's like that part of me that like, wonders like, oh, what if we had like moved to England? Because that was obviously a discussion that was had when we were younger. With my dad offered to my mom, like, if you want to move back and be close to your family, we can do that. So I think there's this part of me that like that what if part of me, and that like I miss my family, I miss seeing them, I feel like I'm missing out on experiences with them. But then there's the other side of me that's like, if I did move now, I would have those same feelings of missing, or feel like I'm missing out with the family that I've created here, with my parents, with all of my separate friend groups.
Right.
And I guess the opportunities, like it's
kind of conflicting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like it's a back and forth of like, I want to be there, but also if I was there, I'd want to be here. And I guess for me, it's just getting to a point where I can financially support myself enough to go over there as much as I can.
When you think of, because obviously you talked before about the various things you're doing, so obviously you're thinking far down the line about what's to be expecting here, and if everything goes accordingly, of course. But does that get stressful for you too now? In describing about going to England feeling that sense of home.
Yeah.
And, and the talk at one point that your father presented to your mother about, well, if you want to go back, we can do that. And then obviously it didn't come through. But when you think about, I have these goals in mind, and we talked before how much you're a very driven person, but when you are looking about what's the next step ahead here, I think it's one of the reasons why I asked you before about how you take the time to if you had taken the time to reflect on yourself about how you look at yourself and so on and so forth. Because there's a part of me that wondered like how far down the line you think about things, because I think there are times, the impression that I'm getting, and you let me know if I'm wrong, that it's far in between that you think about day by day, but instead you're thinking about week, months, years ahead, and then that consumes you because now what do I have to do to get to that point of the line here, a couple years down the road? So I'm going to be doing all these things here, and then it becomes overwhelming where because you're pre-planning doesn't fall through. Okay, well then I have something else I can do, which I've already planned for. And when I talked before last time about you going to school, and I thought you could be focusing on all this stuff as well. And then obviously we already revealed now here about what you did. But I wonder about how much of it is, how much joy you're getting out of it, but at the same time, how much stress you're getting out of it too, because as much fun as you're having with it, doing all that pre-planning and trying to execute all those plans, it could be very overwhelming, which you've already experienced before about the amount of work that you're consuming and doing, that it wiped you out, and then recollecting yourself kind of gave you a different perspective, but you're still doing more or less the exact same thing, a little bit more spaced out, but not as much spaced out as I thought I anticipated here. Again, not that I'm putting expectations, but I'm wondering about that thought process for yourself about what you're expecting and how much you're doing. And then when you think about it in hindsight now, did you think it's even worth it at this point?
So I'm going to go back because I didn't answer your question earlier.
Okay.
But with the reflecting, one of I think the biggest things that this past trip, when I got back, which like I said this earlier, I don't know if it's going to make it in here, but I got stuck in the UK for an extra week.
Yeah,
so I initially was there for 2 weeks, got stuck for a third week. And in that like third week, the first 2 weeks is like my family's all like trying to, make sure that we're all doing stuff, and it's, we're going places. I'm not just sitting at my baptist house all day, every day. And so that third week kind of gave me a little bit more perspective into like the day-to-day life, which the pub culture is something that I absolutely adore about the UK. Like, you get off work early afternoon and you go to your local pub, or you go to one of the bars near where you work, and it's everybody knows everybody. It's a relaxing time. And it's like, that is something, I guess, here in the US, like we have a lot of breweries here in Birmingham. And if I go to, the ones that I regularly go to, like I know the bartenders, I know people that are there, and I can go and hang out and talk to people, but it's not quite the same as it is in the UK. Right. And there's just like the leisurely pace of like work is work, but like we are working to live, not living to work. And whenever I come back and I do like hop back into like, all right, here's like my work schedule, here's my streaming, here's my work, let's, just get back into the groove of things. I do try to like retain a little bit of that. Like I'm working to live, not living to work, and reorganizing my goals around that. As far as it kind of like the feelings of being like overwhelmed now, it's going to sound very silly, but I will kind of like slip back into that like working to live mode, not living to work. And it's like little things will like kind of shock me back into like, wait a minute, like we need to like be living more presently than just like my calendar's booked out through May right now. Like I've got like my days are set in stone. Like from the moment I wake up to when I'm going to bed, like here's meetings, here's when we're working, here's like our social times. And it's with this past burnout, I've been structuring and set like days to be social and see my friends and like make sure that I'm not neglecting those relationships. and days to take time to like relax and take care of myself and rest, because I'm really bad at resting. And so like, you know, I don't want to say breakdown because that's not really what it was, but like the breaking point when I reached it this past time was kind of what jogged that. But one of the things that kind of jogs at an interim for me, especially when I'm not too overwhelmed, is I watch a lot of like British TV shows. Or right now on stream, we're watching Tales of the Unexpected, which like 99% of them take place in the UK.
Yeah.
And you get those smidgens of like the British culture sprinkled in, and it refreshes that mentally for me. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think I know what you're going with that here. But it's funny because you mentioned about the sprinkles of the culture. Because I remember when I was a kid growing up, I'll never forget the feeling that I got. I think when I was watching, I can't remember if I was watching Blackadder or Mr. Bean. And you know, at the time when they were shooting those shows, Blackadder is obviously a period piece that's told throughout this, you know, the series, if you will, about the different time periods that they have, all these skits that occur for whatever the storyline was. Whereas Mr. Bean, on the other hand, had more of like that hometown feel that I remember distinctly gravitating to. Then I remember when I saw Four Weddings and a Funeral, which showed a much more beautiful side of England, but a little more, what's the word I want to use? I guess I don't know. I don't know the best way to describe, but it basically painted England in a such a different light that it gave like of what you said before, like a sense of like home, where I just love that backdrop that it gives you, that sense of peace, if you will. So to this day I have yet to go there, but I have a feeling if I were to go, I probably wouldn't want to leave. But what I'm applying here with what I'm trying to get with you, because I understand what you mean by that, is that when you think about all that for yourself now, and everything you just explained here to me, does your feeling change about yourself when it comes to how you look at the choices you make now for the long term about what is going to be the best decision for you? Because, you know, when you're looking at, in this case, Cult Comedy Cinema being the brand, and you're pushing the brand, you're trying to expand the brand. It's business, but it's also, you know, for yourself, it's also pleasure as well. And that's why I was asking before about what happens if it's all stripped away from you, that it doesn't pan out anymore. Because I ask that question to certain people, because I see that there's a drive, that they have, and the path that they're taking on is not an easy one. And then when they're seeing a momentum, I think it's great, but I always am curious about, but what happens if it's stripped from them and they don't have that opportunity anymore? Are their identity invested into that rather than having their own identity, and that's just a supplement to help them become the person that they are, if you will? So that's why I was asking that question. So in this case now with you, when you're looking at yourself now, do you think that a successful life for you is more about being happy with yourself, or developing the brand that you're creating here, developing the business relationship, the personal relationship to help with the brand that you're trying to create here? Which is more important for you, that your self-happiness or the brand in helping you with your happiness?
I feel like it's both. Okay. For myself, I take a lot of pride personally on like the work that I do, the quality they put out, the relationships that I create and uphold. But I'm also, because I had to have this thought process with the festival when we decided to push it out, because I lost a few people that were working. They were like, we're out. We don't want to wait a year. It was, you know, they were expecting like a quick payout after coming on for a few months. And I had to kind of have that conversation with myself of like, okay, we've been working on this for 2 years. Are we done? Or are we gonna hang out? And what I told myself was, as long as we are still enjoying it, we're going to keep going. But once we stop enjoying it, as long as it's at a point where it's not financially, screwing anyone over, we can always pull the plug. And that was the decision that I went forward with. So I feel like the two are intertwined, but my personal happiness is the one that will take hold. Yeah.
I think I believe I asked this question earlier, but I did ask you that. I think about it, but I'm going to revisit this again for you because I'm really curious now on how you, because in the last conversation we had, we talked about the hurdles of, and you touched about it before here too during the conversation about how the relationships you've had before that where once business came into the picture that it created a divide between some friends, or when it comes to you vetting out in this case, and we talked before about the podcast, and I think you mentioned before about how if you have 30 episodes, then hit me up or something like that.
Yeah.
You have those kind of precedent here. So that's one thing I picked up about how you have these standards. But when you talked about that at that time about the effects it has on your relationships, the effect it has on yourself, and how you've gone about to deal with certain things along the way when it comes to people wanting to get something from you. And we talked before about how they don't have any ill intent, but they clearly don't understand the amount of work and the time that you invest into the said work that they may not realize they're pulling you from, but you're telling them, if you do X, Y, and Z, I will invest back. But otherwise, if you're not, then don't bother me.
Yeah. So
has that changed for you at all about how those situations that you were dealt with beforehand? And if when you run into that again, does your perception on how you look at yourself, on how certain relationships along the way, because you talked before about your friend that you hired to do something with regards to preparing certain work, and you were direct with them after a period of time, and then they said, well, I didn't expect you to be that way with me. It was great to see you do with everybody else, but not to me. And then you're like, well, it's okay. We just move on and we'll grab a beer later on. And then you kind of make amends from there. And it's very rare you come across that. So to me, that shows me you're very grateful that someone understood that aspect of yourself and understand the boundaries of those said relationships here. But even with that being said, though, does your perception about relationship in general, as a result of all those things you've gone through, has that changed along the way too, where you're much more selective, or you're much more, what's the word I want to use? Maybe more open about how you vet people, process things along the way? Has that changed for you?
Honestly, I've gotten a little bit harder with people. I hate to say it.
Yeah. Okay.
I hate to say it because it almost seems cruel to say it, but I will tell you why. Through this whole festival process and with cult comedy, I started reaching out to fish that were too big for me to be trying to catch, if that makes sense.
I know what you're saying.
And in
you have
both
high standards, I take it, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I can get Matthew Lillard on. Let's go. I'm calling his agent after this deep dive on the internet to find their information, and they're like, who are you? And I'm like, I just want him on the show. And they're like, he's busy. And I'm like, okay, all right, bye. And
he's filming Five Nights at Freddy right now. Oh, really? They're making a movie?
Yeah. I was like, he's in New Orleans. He can come to Birmingham. I'll pay for his train ticket up. Let's go. But with cult comedy, but more so with the festival, I, in my mind, was like, oh, I have my idea, I have my business plan, I have my budget, I'm ready for people to come on board and be ready to go. And there were a few instances where I sat down with people thinking I was ready for them to come on board and help in the way that I wanted them to. And they looked at what I had and they were like, you're not ready, come back when you're done. Come back when you're ready. And it was just like, well, it was kind of like a rude wake up call for me, because I was like, well, if someone came to me with this, I would be lax on, and I'd be like, yeah, I can help. Here's my advice. Here's what you need to do. And I kind of was picking those conversations apart and no one was outwardly rude about it. People were like, hey, like you need this, this, and this before you come back to me. And I'm like, all right, cool. I will take that. I will work with it. And I would, go do what they needed and bring it back. But it was in working in those business relationships and in people seeing me take their criticism or take their, here's my advice, do this, and then coming back and being like, hey, I did everything that you did. I also added this, this, and this on because it all flowed together. And then we would take those conversations from there. I saw it gain me more respect. It was a better learning experience for me. Instead of people, me just taking what I had and being like, hey, like, do it for me. Instead, they're not so much do it for me, but like, hey, like, help me now and like kind of help pull me up. It'd be people like, no, like, here's what you need to do to pull yourself up. And I have personally felt recently, God, my words are jumbled right now. It's made me realize that it's made me love what I'm doing a lot more because I'm having to put so much more of myself into it and work so much harder than I thought that I could. And I think that it is important for people to do that. And I say this in the sense of since starting the festival, I have like liquor sponsors for the comedy show that I do in town. And after that happened, I had multiple comedians calling me being like, hey, can you tell me how you got your liquor sponsor? And I was like, I can produce your show for you and I can get you a liquor sponsor. Or I can teach you how to market a show so that you can get recognized. Or I can teach you what to do to get a liquor sponsor, but I'm not going to give you a liquor sponsor, if that makes sense.
Right.
And that whenever I would say like, I'll either teach you to do it or you can pay me to do it. Like I'll produce your show and I'll take my percentage of what you get. And it was met with so much resistance and people getting angry. And it was like, no, like I've had to like crawl through the mud for the last, 6 months to like get to this point. I'm not just going to give it to you for free. Like, and so, like, I'm willing to help people, but I'm also not willing
because they're expecting a handout because they expect you to, right. So, but I don't mean to interrupt you, but what I was curious about when you're saying that, when you're hearing that resistance and you're seeing that resistance, do you take it personal? I mean, no, I'm sorry, you don't take it personal because you said you didn't. I guess my question is, does that anger you a little bit about, hey, I worked really hard and not that you're going to explain to them about why you're not going to give it to them for free, but when you're thinking about, when you're telling me that story now, do you get angered about the that sense of entitlement? But I just asked for advice, just give it to me, and you're saying no, it's a lot more complex than that, which I'm not going to give it to you free. I'm going to help you, but it's going to cost you. And understanding that business sense where they have to understand that if it was them in that position, they probably would be doing the same too. So do you have, is it hard for you to accept that people are not willing to understand that?
Not really, because I feel like I've been there in certain instances. Like there's been, I'm trying to like think of an example. I can't think of one. But like I've been in their shoes. I've gone to people. I mean, I think the example is with this festival, like going to people being like, hey, can you help me get this done? Here's what I've got. And they're like, I can't help you with what you have. Go do X, Y, and Z, and then come back and we'll have a conversation. And then it's when I come back, then they give me the steps that I need. It's like, sorry, I'm just like, I blanked. Okay. So
it's okay.
With the festival, with specific like planning things, like I needed sponsors. And when I was first starting, like I had my sponsorship tiers ready to go. And I was like, here's my sponsorship stuff. Like I had it in like a nice, nice little Excel spreadsheet, not Excel, like Word form. It looked nice. It was ready to go. And I went to someone and they're like, yeah, we need to get a slide deck. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about making a slide deck. So I went back, made a slide deck. And then it was, we need to add X, Y, and Z to that slide deck. You need to have, if you're going to have the slide deck, this, and this are going to need to be. And it was like, realizing that, like, while I was taking them the bare bones of what they needed to help me, they couldn't work with the bare bones. They needed, all of it. And so I had to then come back, learn how to do it, get everything together. And then I went to them, and then it was like, okay, now here's the next steps. Here's the connections that you need. I'm now comfortable helping you make the connections that you need to get the sponsorships that you want. And so when I've had comedians coming to me, and it's like, they're like, so how did that happen? Like, how did you get that? And I'm like, I'd be happy to teach you if you bring me your business model and your business structure, but I'm not giving you away my contacts that I had to earn by doing what I am trying to get you to do now.
Right.
So I don't get angry. It's more of like, I see that entitlement. I understand where it's coming from. And it's more of like, if somebody does come to me, because I've had multiple people that have been like, yeah, I'll get on that. And I'll bring it to you. And they never bring it to me. And it's every time I see them, every time I talk, they're like, oh, I got to bring that to you. And I'm like, all right, like, cool. Like, I'm here whenever you do. I don't feel bad. The only thing that I don't like is when then the conversation then turns around to like, oh, well, you're just, like, keeping everything for yourself. And it's like, no, I'm more than happy to help, as long as I know that you're going to put the work in, because just like the person that helped me backed me up with their name, I would be helping. If I'm helping you, I'm backing you up with my name. And I need to know that it's going to be that quality, that you're going to put the effort in, that you're going to follow up, and that you're going to treat my contacts with the respect that they have come to expect from me.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
It answers the question. Yeah. It answers the question. I don't know if I may have in some variation. I may have said this to you before, but I have grown, as I said earlier, to respect you a great deal. But the reason why, as I pointed out before, why I do think very highly of you is because, apart from what you just shared about the various things you've gone through in your life, and as far as your professional life is concerned, the various endeavors you go through, I respect the fact that you never gave up, this on the struggle. You kept going forward with it. And then when you had shared just now about, you talked before about not that you don't want to make it a gender, because I understand what you mean by that, where because you are in a position now where you're able to more or less have these demands be met, and people are looking to you for work or whatever the case may be, advice.
Yeah.
And you've developed that reputation, and the resume speaks for itself because you have the backing to prove your said work. And to be able to keep that momentum for yourself and do it, in my opinion, at a really high level, maybe in other people's eyes, with what you're telling me about how people are asking you for advice and they want a handout rather than the tools to learn how to work and get to that point. And you having the patience and understanding of like where they're coming from, and being sympathetic and respectful despite their confrontational resistance, if you will. And the various people I've come across in this particular capacity here there are a handful of people that I've come across that I think are just going to excel, and no matter what they do, they're going to be, in my opinion, the standard as far as like with whatever they're capable of doing. That's, I'm not going to say that's the example, but that's the standard. And if you can surpass that, then you've done very well. And then now you're going to set the standard, or someone else is going to have to surpass that and do whatever the case may be. That's how highly I think of you personally, that you do have a really strong work ethic, but a really good personality to go with it as well too, as a person and as a good person, I would say. Because from the times you've given your time with me to share certain details of things I've asked of you before, and also on the various other things that you and I have discussed in private, you still have a really good head on your shoulders from what I've gathered here. So I hope whenever because I'm always very cautious to do this here because I don't want to cross any lines, but whenever I interject and say, I think stick with this, when I told you before about don't lose that balance, because I really mean that. I think that's a great quality you have, and I hope you never lose it, because people need to understand that if just because it's cold outside, you can't expect someone to hand you a jacket to step outside. And sometimes, you have to be very direct about how things are, and there's a way to go about it. And I think you've gone to a point where you've more or less mastered that, I think. And that's actually something I've learned from you, to be honest with you. So I have nothing but great respect for you. And I really do mean that. I think you're one of the best at what you do. And the various things that you also do as well are going to be pursuing. I think you're going to succeed in it. Despite the highs and lows that comes with it, but I think you're going to excel in it. And I have no doubt in my mind that in time, the very same people that would have been very resistant to you are going to be willing to take anything from you at this point in terms of like, what do I need to pay you for you to give me your time? And I think that will be the standard where they have to understand that at that point, your time is very valuable and they're willing to spend the time that's necessary to give you your worth, if you will, to have you do that in return for them. And I'm sure along the way, you probably do a little things here and there to give them that extra incentive to because of what they have been able to invest into you along the way. So I don't mean to go long-winded with that here, but that's me giving me your flowers, because you're truly one of my most favorite people that I've ever spoken with. And I think that you are, like I said before, one of the best at what you do. And I will believe that no matter what you touch, it'll turn into gold. And I think that when people see that, they'll respect that even more. And I think the resistance will be a lot less in time. And I think in time, the work will speak for itself to the point where the name Natalia Hawthorne will be like, it will be more or less like the equivalent of like Steven Spielberg. Like, okay, that's quality right there. So yeah, well, I know I understand what your reaction, but I do believe that your name will hold that value where people will know it and they'll say, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about here. That is a person you have to respect and someone who brings in great value and great quality. So yes, we know what the reputation that name has. So I think you will bring that to whatever it is you decide to pursue here, be it called Company Semina, whatever else endeavors you want to get into. But I'm rambling on here, but you understand where I'm coming from here. So I know that there are some things you're working on that you can't tell here, but maybe in closing, I don't know if there's anything you want to just more or less close out with as far as what anyone else could be expecting here from you that you can indulge us with here. Because by the time this episode uploads, it'll probably be a few weeks from now. So I'm not sure if there's anything you would want to reveal at this point.
I think the only thing that's going to be happening within the next few weeks is all of the behind the scenes for the festival will be starting on the Punchlines in Paradise Instagram. And I've got some stuff for Cult Comedy yet, but I'm not ready. I don't have like set dates yet, so I don't want to say anything too soon.
Are you talking about potential guests? Is that what you're referring to?
Just like potential like branch offs with like new things we're going to be trying.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to have everything in the description down below for everyone to check out here. But I really mean what I say with everything I just closed off here with you, that I really think you're one of the best people out there. I really mean that. And I respect you. And I have nothing but high hopes for you with your future endeavors moving forward from here. So until next time, cheers.
Thank you so much.